Sort of Coming Chapter 821. Sorry, the update is a bit late. P.S. Volumes 8 to 14 of the Jianlai physical book are on the market. Lu Xianying saw that there was no sword repair coming to block the way for the time being. When he climbed up, he turned his head and looked at the distance between Yixian Peak and Full Moon Peak. There are still patches of white clouds passing by, but from now on, there will be no female Yujin Qing. Cloud, a dark night clothes, backed by the verdant hills and trees. This kind of questioning sword really couldn't make Lu Xianying feel meaningful. Today Lu Xianying had 3 mountaineering inquiries: Qiongji Peak, Yujiao Peak and Full Moon Peak. A sword repairman came to lead the sword. In the end, Lu Yu retreated. He was still lying on the ground and sleeping on the ground. No one dared to pick it up. The last female ghost who showed the beauty of Yupu only knew that he was born in Full Moon Peak but had no self. The female sword fairy who reported her name was even more dead. Qingshan waited for the bright moon every night. Bai Yun advised to drink the contents of the pot. Lu Xianying took out a jug of wine and drank while climbing. Finally walked to the first line of peaks near the mountainside, far from Tingjian Pavilion, not to mention the Patriarch Hall on the top of the sword. It seems that Fei Jian sent a letter earlier, as if the flowers bloomed for the second time in the mountains. Qin Pingon should have picked a chair over there as agreed and was waiting for him with tea. This guy Qin Pingon is a little good. He doesn't talk big when he is a kid. He only has a penny in his pocket and never talks about 2 pennies. He does what he says. In fact, excluding the peaks and green mountains, it seems that it is difficult to get off the thief boat, and the green water and white clouds should not come to Xingyang Mountain. Lu Xianying cursed all the way, yelling at Xingyang Mountain to have another who can beat him. Stop disgusting him, Uncle Lu, and only let the women and the come here to lead the sword. What's the matter? Lu Xianying named Taoist surnames one by one and scolded the Lord Zhuhuang, Full Moon Peak Xiayuntai, Qiu Lingshan Tao Yanbo, and Shuilong Peak Yan Chu, and once again carried forward the simple folk customs unique to his hometown, and helped these people by the way. The old sword Immortal got a nickname, Yellow Bamboo, near green in winter, unable to escape Yen Lai. Connected together again, it is the bamboo green and yellow in winter. Yen can't escape it. It just so happens that today you can do the celebration together in Xingyang Mountain. Oddly speaking, all the sword repairers were filled with outrage on the mountains where their ancestors like Full Moon Peak and Qiu Lingshan had been scolded, but they showed no signs of leaving the mountain to take out their swords. On the contrary, Yunfeng and Pianjifeng are all mountains that can be completely out of the way. There are already several young sword repairs, and they have left with swords and rushed to the first line peak. Knowing that he would lose or even die, he had the default permission of his ancestor, or under the personal leadership of the peak master sword Xiu, he would go to meet that young sword fairy Lu Xianying for a while. On the side of Tingjian Pavilion, the Lord Zhuhuang had previously said that something was going to Jianding, but he didn't tell anyone what to do and who to see. This surprised the 3 old sword immortals Xianxia because the suggestion made by the emperor and them, but because of the sudden death of the worshipper behind the scenes, the plan was lost. Because her soul has long been fused with the frontline peak and mountain protection formation, originally she only had to say hello to her at the stop sword pavilion. Even if she fell down with Lu Xianying Wenjian, she only needs to run the formation, disturb the weather of the world and help cover people's eyes. The 3 ancestors including Xia Yunqi in Tingjian Pavilion can cooperate with each other and quietly release their swords, and the sword will cut Lu Xianying without knowing it. Zhang Li Yanchu hurriedly asked at that time, since things have changed, how to hand out that sword next. The Emperor Bamboo seemed to be absent and he only said to let them act on their own. Xiayuntue was so angry that he almost picked up her son on the spot. How can you be the master of the nephew? Do you want to throw away the treasurer? At the Tingjian Pavilion, even if the Emperor Bamboo smiled and apologized to many guests, he left without a trace. There is still a jade, 2 yuan and 3 old swordsmen sitting here. Among them, the ancestor Xiayunsue has 2 natal flying swords, 1 moon halo also called ground frost. Another natal flying sword is even more powerful. It can kill people invisibly and is called Sad. Tao Yanbo, as the god of wealth in Xingyang Mountain, was named as Yulo from an ancient relic of the kingdom of Shu. He was born as a flying sword and named Qiubua. Feijin Qiubua. The name is quite charming, but it is the extremely vicious natal power of Jianlu. The sword energy is like the autumn wind. Once in the body, the sword energy is cold and cleans the liver and intestines so that the Qi practitioner who has suffered from the injury of Feijian, the large mansions in the small world of the human body, a little bit of aura will gradually turn cold, and eventually the aura in the body will condense like ice and there is pain from the heart. Zhang Lv Yanchu's natal flying sword, Mountain Borer. What's more, there is also Wu Tijing who will secretly play a sword. The close disciple of the sovereign Zhu Huang, whose life is flying sword Yuanyang, can first hurt the Taoist heart of the monk's heart, and then in turn hurt the monk's own soul. It is more sad than Xia Yuanqui's flying sword. One of the most unreasonable flying sword magical powers. Therefore, in Xingyang Mountain Patriarch Hall, many sword immortals who knew about this had inquired in detail with the Emperor Bamboo in private. What is a Taoist in the heart? The Emperor Bamboo didn't hide his personal secrets, and he said with a smile, as long as he has truly liked anyone on the path of practice, that counts. As for the other flying sword of disciple Wu Tijing, neither the Emperor Bamboo nor anyone mentioned its name. So as long as Situ Weining doesn't lose so without warning, Xingyang Mountain can completely make Lu Xianying not know how he died. The old ape in white coats, his arms around his chest, glanced at Xianxia with a look of disappointment on his face and sneered, Situ Weining, a sloppy waste with an empty swordsmanship, can be regarded as losing the face of Full Moon Peak today. Fortunately she is not in the rain. Phone cultivating, otherwise the thunder and rain will be small. In fact, Xianxia hates the direct disciple more than Yuan Xinye in his heart. It is really a thing that has failed to succeed. It is just that Yuan Xini's wound is so salted and the fires poured oil. Xianxia is so angry that he shouted with this protector. The name is Yuan Xinye. Don't rely on great credit, you can just talk about it and you are not as good as me. The white-clothed old ape twitched the corner of his mouth and said, on the credit book don't talk about qualifications. An old sword fairy who would only practice swords after hiding in the mountains all his life, besides his seniority and realm, what else could he have left? Therefore, in Yuan Xini's view, it is not as good as Tao Yanbao and Yen Chu who are really doing things by Yuaning Jianxiu. After that, without waiting for Xia Yuansui and Yuan Xinye to break, the Emperor Bamboo went to the top of the sword, and then there was the Ancestor Hall flying sword and scattered flowers among the peaks, and then one fairy left the Xingyang mountain boundary. Tao Yanbao was shocked, Xia Yuanqui's face was even more gloomy, and Yen Chu was especially embarrassed because he was the one who showed up the most among the several ancestors in Xingyang Mountain before the official start of the celebration. He was the one who made the most appearances in the several questions. I told Zhou that even though I can't figure it out and I don't know why it was in such a situation, Yen Chu can only confirm one thing. There are still countless outsiders who are watching a movie through the mirror. Tao Yanbao asked in his heart, where is the God sect? Xianxia said helplessly, Qizhen only said that something happened temporarily. Yen Chu couldn't help cursing his mother. Something? There's a fart. Is this Tianjun eager to go to the Qingming world by Yujing to see the patriarch? Then your one is ascending. Xianxia asked in return, what do those in the real world sect say? Tao Yanbao sighed and said with a tired look, this group of people took the wrong medicine and they ignored Rune's sword and asked. Wait until Chao Ping is gone. The three old sword immortals looked at each other immediately. Even the guardian who was said to be right to the matter and not to the person, by the Lord Zhu Huang said no more sarcasm. This made Lu Xianying walk all the way to the middle of the mountain without any hindrance. Until two groups of sword repairs from different mountain tops fell on the halfway of Yixian Peak. They came from Boyun Peak and Pianju Peak respectively. It is the rare good atmosphere of the old and new peaks of Xingyang Mountain. The two waves of pure sword repair in front of you, why bother with Chilling Mountain and Full Moon Peak? As a mountain palm law, Yen Chu gave a strict order to the Patriarch Hall with the sword repair of the two peaks of the mountain, so that no matter what the two sword repairs he must stop the Lu Xianying from continuing to climb, regardless of life or death. However, Lu Xianying only spoke with the two leading sword repairmen, and then the two Xingyang Mountain Golden Core sword immortals were slightly injured. Later, Yunfeng's old Jindan sword repairer was still unwilling to give way, and he took the lead in setting up a sword formation with his disciple. As a result, the sword formation broke up as soon as he got up, and the dozens of sword repairers with very different ages were shaking one by one. Lu Xianying glanced at the group of Yunfeng swordsmen, and found that he still didn't mean to give way, nor was he used to them. The next moment, including the old Jindan who had fought side by side with Jian Xianli Kai, all fell to the ground. On the side of Pianqi Peak, the peak master female ancestor, after seeing the woman's ghost sword self-cultivation figure with her own eyes, She knows a little bit of the inside story and her heart is sad. Yugong, she still makes people rush to Xinjiang with the root sword repair. The mountain prevented Lu Xianying from climbing. You see, she was too lazy to go, so she just reminded the big disciple of Longmen realm sword repair. Do your best, don't have to work hard. When Pian Kaifeng set up a sword formation again, it fell to the ground again. Lu Xianying bypassed the crooked sword repairs on the ground, dropped the hip flask in his hand and continued climbing alone. After that, 2 sword repairmen Qiulingshan and Shilongfeng came to join in the fun, but compared to the 2 groups of people in front of them, they were firm, life and death free, as if facing the person asking the sword, they were just golden pills. Later he seemed very guilty, as if he was facing an ascending realm sword repairman. The most interesting thing is that he first went to the Shuilong peak on the first line peak for the sword repair, and his footing was not close to Lu Xianying. As a result, the Qiu Lingshan sword repair on the Zhoushan mountain was more courteous, and he landed on the farther steps of the gods. It is estimated that there is another Feng Jianxiu coming back, and he will have to settle down directly at Tingjian Pavilion. Lu Xianying glanced over and suddenly raised his arm, which shocked the Shilongfeng sword repairmen. Among them was a young swordsman who had gone down the mountain for several times and even went to the so-called central battlefield with the elders of his division. In a panic, he took the lead in offering a flying sword of his life. The sword light flashed and went straight to Lu Xianying. After going away, the latter caught the flying sword with his 2 fingers, threw it on the ground and stepped on it with 1 foot. Lu Xianying stared. You kidnap attack before you even say to start the fight? Isn't it righteous? Lu Xianying took out a rough version of the ancestral genealogy from his sleeve, and began to quickly turn the pages, occasionally raising his head to ask if someone so-and-so was so-and-so, some nodding, good luck, safe and sound, some nodding, did not turn the almanac when they went out. Suddenly the 7 orifices bleed, the body was seriously injured and fell to the ground until the middle of winter. One of the Dragon Gate realm sword repairs broke down on the spot with his life-flying sword, and completely broke off the longevity bridge. There are more sword repairs that fell to the ground. What Feijin broke was just enough to save a road of cultivation that was destined to be extremely difficult in the future. Lu Xianying closed the booklet, and then all the standing Shilongfeng sword repairs were not too severely injured and fell to sleep. Lu Xianying continued to ascend, seeing Qiu Lingshan's pale-faced sword repairmen, and then took out the booklet and began to roll the names. After all, for so many years I have seen more of Xinjiang Mountain's Jingguashuiyu. Almost all of them are familiar faces, but they don't match the names on the booklet and I don't know the other's surname. Qiu Lingshan Jianxiu is very smart here. The people who are named are expressionless but helpless. The smart people around are always looking at some clues, so Lu Xianying is not polite. All of them are named but dare, all pretending to be deaf and dumb. All were seriously injured and they were not allowed to faint on the spot. Several of them were rolling on the ground. One of them was an old sword repairman in the Sevuing realm who had an excellent reputation on the mountain. His fate was particularly miserable. The fold broke again and then the Chongqing bridge was interrupted. Finally, Lu Xianying waved his sleeves and threw the body out of a line of peaks, and fell heavily to the side of the mountain gate Yulin as a companion. In the booklet, the length of the record of the great achievements of this Sevuing swordsman is not short, one by one shocking. At Tingjian Pavilion, Yan Chu said solemnly, "Can't wait any longer. I'll host the Zhoushan Great Formation." Xia Yuncui and Tao Yanbo nodded together. Yan Chu looked at the peaks beyond the first line peak, feeling heavy and abnormal, and said with emotion, "How could it become like this?" The white-clothed old ape was silent, suddenly widened his eyes, full of murderous intent, and his body was soaring to the sky. The whole Pingjian Pavilion was shocked, but this guardian did not go to the top of the sword, but went straight to back Jianfeng. Either they didn't come to watch the ceremony at all, like Longquan Jianzong Fengxue Temple and Zhenwu Mountain, they didn't give the slightest face to Xinjiang Mountain. But now that they are here, they have already stayed in Zhufeng Mansion and left again. This is a great landscape taboo on the mountain. Compared with the 2 games of Huanghe and Lu Xianying, they are not in line with the rules of the mountain. Qizhen, the Tianjun of the Divine Sect, is the nominal leader of the monks of one continent, and the Divine Sect, located on the border of Nanjian State, as the leader of many immortals in Aquarius, has always acted steadily and treated the many disputes on the mountain not leaning. Not only does the God Sect occupies a blessed place in Qingtan, but the suzerain Qizhen is also the title of true monarch of the 4 kingdoms. Therefore, the ferry where the Taoist heavenly monarch was traveling was the most thrilling for the spectators, because with Xian's magical powers, it was not difficult to walk quietly, but Xian did not do so. He moved his whole body with a pole and only talked about the emperor and generals on Pianqi Peak, plus the previous reminder of Zhongyue Mountain Junjinqing, and he walked half of it all at once. The congratulatory people of the True Realm sect went straight away. The lord of the fairyland Lu Laoqing and the old gang leader of the invincible divine fist gang, Gao Mian, two old friends, walked away together. As the chief worshipper Lu Zhimao, the true monarch of Zhejiang, and the second worshipper dedicated to Li Fuyu, there is no hidden trace, and each slowly winds up and leaves Xingyang Mountain. On the way to the gods of the mountains and rivers, the extremely lofty Dashanjin Jinqing directly tore his face with Xingyang Mountain, digging a corner, and in full view he took Zhenxiu Yuanbai away, and Yuanbai announced on the spot, "Get out of Xingyang Mountain by yourself." In addition, the Caishi Mountain God and the Yongjiang Water God of the Nanyue Chujun Mountain each led a large group of landscape gods within their jurisdiction, and a shrunken mountain river disappeared without a trace. There is also an old jiao from the Qiantang River Fengshui Cave. The fairy from the Sui dynasty left with Cheng Longzhou, who had been promoted from the deputy head of the Linlu Academy of Faiyun Mountain to the head of the Dafu Academy. The Chao Jun, who claims to be from Niping Alley and a hometown of Lu Xianying, handed out 3 swords toward Cheongji Peak. He probably felt that he still hadn't done enough. He sneaked back to the boundary of Xingyang Mountain and went to the Immortal's backsword peak. The natal flying sword, which has been refined and repaired for many years, surrounds the foot of the mountain around the backsword peak, and in an instant there are lotus flowers. After that, Chao Jun holds the saber again from the top to the bottom, the sword light falls from the top and no one is there. The guard's back Jianfeng is divided into 2. It let you, the old ancestor of the move, step on the roof of Grandpa Chao's ancestral house in Nipping Lane. After Chao Jun cut open the mountain with a sword, he then regained his sword and swayed away. He said, "The peak opener, so is Grandpa Chao." Yunxia Mountain, which has a very good relationship with Xingyang Mountain, has a pair of masters and apprentices, arguing endlessly. The old fairy master of the mountain must feel that this progeny is not a ghost. He does not say the reason but only persuades himself to leave Xingyang Mountain. "Congratulations." The old teacher laughed a lot and asked Kai Jinjian if he knew if he did this he would cut off all the incense from Xingyang Mountain. Is it because of the questioning sword of a direct disciple of the Longquan Jianzong, and a few more flying swords with clouds covering the mist, Yunxia Mountain will be abandoned, and it will be opposed to Xingyang Mountain? The youngest ancestor of the Yuanying woman among the 12 peaks of Yunxia Mountain said that the disciple knew, but because of this he had to leave here. The old mountain master was old and prudent. After all, there is still a Yunlin Jiang, the gentleman of the academy Jiang Shan, who temporarily holds his troops, and stays on the full moon peak. Kai Jinjian tried to persuade her teacher to no avail, so she had to leave alone. After a while, the old fairy master caught up with Kai Jinjian, because he had just received a secret letter. Chao Ping, the envoy of Dallas patrol hunter, left, leaving only the minister of rights from the capital. On the full moon peak, Jiang Shan walked out of the mansion and came to the pavilion. He found that Jiang Yun, Wei Liang and Fu Nanhua had all left, leaving only a bloated sister. Jiang Xing asked, "Brother, have you also received a letter from Feijian?" Jiang Shan shook his head. Jiang Xing asked curiously, "Wei Liang said that he came here this time to ask someone for a dismantling. So mysterious, do you know what it means?" Jiang Shan pointed his finger at the ferry boats that left Xingyang Mountain and said helplessly, "Isn't it obvious?" Jiang Xing looked blank. "Huh? Didn't you mean to demolish the Patriarch's Hall in Xingyang Mountain? I thought I could take out a flower." Speaking of this, she smiled to herself. The flying swords were dense before, blooming like flowers on the top of the mountain, and the scenery was really beautiful. After all, Beipingzu is not Beiju Luzhou. It is not common to demolish the Patriarch Hall. Jiang Shan rubbed his eyebrows with his fingers and said, No. Wei Liang, there is no mountain or dew, but it is this person who personally formulated the Dali Court's landscape rules behind the scenes, and finally erected a monument on the top of the mountain so that the monks on the mountain must follow the rules and follow the orders. And Lu Qingfeng, who served as the official book of the ceremonial department of Dallas Companion Capital, secretly planned the genealogy of the gods of the continent. In short, these two are not natives of Dei, but both can occupy high positions in Dei Temple. Therefore they are regarded as the highly regarded, professional students of the national teacher Cui Yun, but they are just anonymous. The average person in the officialdom of Dai is naturally not aware of this inside story. Jiang Xing asked, "Brother, since you are here, are you planning to wait a while to go to the frontline peak to observe the ceremony?" Jiang Shan still said, yes and no. Jiang Shan became angry and said, "One by one from Jiang Yun to Wei Liang to eldest brother Yu, can you still speak human words?" Jiang Shan smiled and said, "The full moon peak is so close to the first line peak, you can't see any scenery, don't have to go to Jianding to join in the fun." On Shuilong Peak, Zifeng's female ancestor Tianwan floated down. In a mansion she quietly found a young monk in the Dragon Gate realm. This guy is like a mourning concubine at the moment. There is still a plate of wine and crabs on the table. Half of the meal is left. In the second half I was really not in the mood to continue eating. After he found Tianwan, he saw that the auntie was crazy with a grateful look on his face and vigorously waved his sleeves. Brother genius, I am finally lucky enough to be able to meet you. This time I ask the sword, I must remember you. Writing skills." That Xianxia was stunned on the spot, not knowing why Tianwan wanted to come to herself at such a moment, and said some idiots and couldn't understand it, as if from the look in her eyes, face and words, this dogwood Grandmaster Feng changed her person. In his impression, Tianwan smiled happily at everyone. The one in front of him seemed to smile too brightly. In fact, it is Tianwan who is from Niobuzan in front of him who is in charge of Zheng Yangshan's information and name. It's just that he is the proud disciple of Li Yanchu who is highly regarded and trusted by the ancestors. Over the years Tianwan has been easily removed. Wan the aunt-in-law was emptied, so he felt that Tianwan Kong had a seat in the patriarch's hall. It was too stupid. It was effortless and 100 talents. It was like only half of it and he had already won the vital spy power. In recent years he has just searched for the spy on the Luapa mountain. He has worked hard, tried his best and has produced many methods. Can be said that he has gained a lot. Not only has he close contact with the Su family in Qingfeng City with the Dragon Kiln, but also the Lu family on Fulu Street. Several surnames inside as well as several immortal sects in Dashan to the west have extremely concealed correspondence, and he even got on the line with the Chongdan River Water God Empress. It's just that he didn't think that Lu Xianying of Longquan Sword Sect seemed to be not a golden core swordsman. Was it really his own spy? On the side of Tingjian Pavilion, just for a moment the three old sword immortals including Xia Yuntui had their heartstrings tense as if they were facing an enemy. The next moment that Lu Xianying was already standing between Tao Yanbao and Yan Chu with one hand on the shoulder of an old Jianxian, but with his heartfelt smile, and Xia Yuntui, "Don't move, move and die." Xia Yuntui swallowed a mouthful of blood, looking at the young sword fairy who seemed to be asking the three of Jian at the same time. A face had begun to ooze fine blood. However, Xia Yuntui, who was the highest among the three, didn't need to weigh the pros and cons and quickly gave up the plan to share life and death with this person. Don't worry, the immortal still has Yuan Xinye on his back at Jianfeng Jianding Patriarch Hall and the Lord Zhu Huang. As for Tao Yanbao and Yan Chu, they seem to have been given a fixation technique, but they are actually immersed in the small world. Lu Xianying held the shoulders of the two old sword immortals with both hands, turned his head and smiled with Xia Yuntui. "The older you are, the younger you are? The older you are, the thicker your face?" The number 30 or 40 immortal masters who had come to stop the sword pavilion a long time ago, none of them spoke righteously or cursed a few words with Lu Xianying, but they had a tacit understanding. Everyone moved silently away from the four sword immortals. Xia Yuntui said in his heart, "Lu Xianying, since you have such a mysterious natal flying sword, you shouldn't be here today and accidentally hurt the foundation of the Dao Dao." Although he did not choose to fight for his sword, Xia Yuntui has been observing Lu Xianying's movements all the time. Before he asked the sword a game between the electric light and flint, and indeed he lost a lot, but this young man dared to ask the three swords at the same time. For a while the blood flowed and it was already bloody. It seemed that it would not last long. Lu Xianying said, "It seems that Situ Weining is returning your direct disciple? At first I didn't understand her broken jar, but now I understand it. I met you as a preaching teacher. Forget it, I have nothing to do with you. Talking anyway, you full moon peak, you have to change your name in the future." The Dali official's ferry was still hovering outside the first line peak, but Chao Ping had already left on the Fuzhou, neither deliberately fanfare nor deliberately concealed its trace. but as long as he was a discerning person he knew it. To a large extent, Chao Ping's participation in the ceremony was more important than the congratulations of Yunlin Jiang's. Moreover, on the Dali court ferry the official accompanying the patrol envoy was just a minister of rights, and after all he was not the sage master who was in charge of a country's landscape. And even if it was Yuan Xiangshu from the Ministry of Rights of the capital, really, and Chao Ping, who was born under the same name of Xiangju State, broke the officialdom rules of Yuan Chao different roads for the first time. The two parties were willing to visit Xingyang Mountain together, but Xingyang Mountain still did not dare to have any favoritism. The courtesy officer who was forced to stay alone on the ferry had to hurriedly spread the letter to Dali capital from Feijian, hoping that Yuan Xiangshu from his own office would give a clear explanation so that he would not do something wrong and say something wrong. Guan Yiran and Lu Xuanmei, two wealthy children from Qixiang and Cheer Street, watched the excitement at the ferry viewing platform. Yushenfeng gave Chi-Chi an elbow on the ribs and had to fight with Guan Yi. Then he asked, "Is that the kids' movement?" In the early years in Shijianhu, there was a thin-faced but bright-eyed Mr. Accountant. He had a drink at the wine table with them and a bunch of warriors on the battlefield. The guy's drinking was so good that he was superb at persuading him to drink. "It's high and I'm desperately clamoring that I'm not drunk. That guy is fine. No matter how you look at it, he would have to go to the bottom of the table and circle around after drinking half a bowl." In the end, bowl after bowl was indeed the one who drank the most. "I can still walk away from the wine table again and again." Guan Yiran smiled and said nothing. Not far from the ferry, Fengshua Temple female Xiu Huiting stood beside a handsome man who was considered a senior uncle by his seniority. This woman, among the monks in the Dali army who was known for her cold face and ferocious killings, had a slight face. Hong asked softly, "Uncle Wei, why are you here?" The man said indifferently, "I have nothing to do, just relax." He actually regretted being the anonymous guest. Refers to the Xianfeng Yuan Lingdian, which is the monk of Luzhou in Beiju. He was not in the Wei and Jin dynasties. He was not close to Luopa Mountain and it was not far away. Therefore Wei Jin made up his mind as long as he left the Xingyang Mountain boundary this time, he would cross the continent and return to the Great Wall of Jianqi. "The last time I was there it was a battle of defending the city. This time I revisited the old place and I can go further to the south to shoot my sword." On a talisman boat leaving the ferry, patrol hunter Chao Ping took out the secret letter again. It is said to be Fuzhou, but it is actually a Pangranlu ship which is heavily guarded. In addition to the Chao family's personal rebels, there are also monks who are attached to the Dali Frontier Army's Iron Cavalry, and there is also a royal worship arranged by the Song family. Chao Ping poured a bowl of wine, drank it for himself, and revisited the secret letter signed Luopashen Chen Pinyin. The letter said that within 300 years, Luopa Mountain guaranteed that the incense of the Chao family of Xiangju Kingdom would not have some of the worst accidents. In addition, within 300 years, publicly and privately, as long as they are candidates who have been inspected by the Chao family, who are qualified to be among the 7 realms of martial arts and gold core immortals, whether they are cultivating beautiful jade or sword fairy embryos, they can be sent. Come to Luopa Mountain to practice. The handwriting is in neat lowercase letters, and the sharpness is convergent everywhere. If it is said that the true words are born from the heart, then the young mountain master who wrote this letter is either a prodigal and cunning person in the city, or a very disciplined person. People. The letter also stated that if the Chao family does not want to be involved too deeply with Luopa Mountain can secretly recommend and send them to Taihui Sword Sect, Duckweed Sword Lake or Phi Ma Sect in Luzhou, Beiju. The Dragon Elephant Sword Sect of Nan Pasuozhou. Chao Ping put down the secret letter in his hand and tapped his finger on the desktop. The Chao family was originally the surname of the Xiangju Kingdom of Dali, and the key is that he, a military minister who has reached the ultimate patrol envoy, has a family and 2 honors in civil and military affairs. Sit back and relax. On the contrary, the next stage is the real test of the Chao family's status as officials, and they lose all the games accidentally. Chao wants to be stable and maintain this hard-won scenery. The answer is not in the temple but in the mountains, and it can only be in the mountains. Therefore, the secret letter given by Guan Yiran was not icing on the cake, but a gift in the snow, which was an excellent opportunity to solve Chao's urgent need. If in the next 300 years, there will continue to be the children of the Chao family, as well as those vassal clansmen who can enjoy the cool under the big tree of the Chao family, or the embryonic monks secretly sought out through various channels, They will gradually become. What does this mean for the 5 or 6 ancestors including Luopa Mountain? This is a family blooming in the mountains. Compared with the clansmen in the officialdom of the temple, the flowers bloom and fade. Once the emperor and the courtier, the incense on the mountain lasts for more than 300 years? Naturally, there are too many droughts and floods to guarantee income. As long as the mountains are managed properly, the Chao family can even take the initiative to take a step or two in the Dali temple. The Yuan family in the Shangzhou kingdom used the family concubine to marry the pro-daughter of the Su family in Qingfeng city, which is actually the same. Luopa Mountain, who just entered the family of the first Immortal family not long ago. Of course, Chao Ping knew about such major events. The letter mentions several sects outside of Luopa Mountain, especially the Dragon Elephant Sword sect in Nanpasuozhou. The sender is Guaniran. This is a young man who seems to be covered with official amulet. From the first emperor to His Majesty the Emperor, to the entire bureaucracy who once had the surname Guan, and even more than half of the old men of the 6 bureaucracies, they all opposed Guan Yi. Ran has high hopes and is willing to regard him as half of his own children. And of course Chao Ping himself is also extremely optimistic about Guan Yiran. When a great sword immortal in Fengxue temple said that this person was credible, then Chao Ping knew it well. This mountain business can be done. A great priest knocked on the door lightly. Chao Ping frowned slightly, put the secret letter into his sleeves and said, "Come in." The Song family consecrated from the capital said softly, "General Chao, before I disembark, I listened to the tone of the stewardess Ma, lining up for Xingyang Mountain, as if it was the meaning of the Empress Dowager Dali. Let's go, right? Something is wrong. Listen to it, it seems, isn't it?" Chao Ping sneered in his heart, playing officialdom with Lao Tzu? Once the national teacher left, did he start playing this set again? Chao Ping picked up a military book on the table and asked, "Who?" The worshipper bit his head and said, "The Empress Dowager." In the end, Chao Ping only slightly squinted his eyes, still with an unintelligible look on his face. A patrol hunter who is the mainstay of a great iron cavalry, knows or does not understand, you can completely see the mood, but he does not dare to understand the worship, and he will leave carefully without saying a word. Chao Ping began to read the military books. A woman who dares to give orders to me? She considers herself the military Song Chongjing or the emperor. A line of peak sword top. All the Wamafeng female cultivators are pale, but they still dare not leave the Zushitang square without authorization. Qin Pingon walked to the entrance of the Zushitang and told Emperor Zhu that he was going to welcome the old ancestor who moved the mountain. After crossing the threshold, he was only a few steps away from the Immortal at the door, who was condensed by the sword energy of Xingyang Mountain. The Emperor Bamboo was still digesting the accident. When this young man was drinking tea earlier, he was not ashamed, saying that this congratulatory celebration could be turned into a tree and a mess. If you don't believe it, you can sit and drink tea while watching. Xingyang Mountain is invincible on one continent and your family has a big business. The establishment of the next sect is the general trend. The Zhongtu Confucian Temple and the Dai Song family have agreed to this. Naturally, no one can stop it. Of course, I am no exception. But I promise that I can do one thing so that everything becomes irrelevant to the Emperor Bamboo. In the future, every time Zhangyangshan disciples mention the Emperor Zhu, they will praise the Supreme Lord, the ancestor of Zhongxing, and have done much. Because on the mountain and water spectrum of Xingyang Mountain, you can only choose one of the suzerain and protect the mountain, and only one can survive. Being arrogant and arrogant. But watching the ferry boats drift away, making the Emperor Bamboo even more frightened. Qin Pingon shook his rolled-up sleeves and glanced at the back of Jianfeng. The old beast was led by Chao Jun's sword. Qin Pingon smiled and taught a suzerain, "The big things are calm, the small things are steady, the things are calm and the things are not clear. Bamboo sovereign, you have not cultivated enough." After a moment of silence, Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Emperor Bamboo, have you decided yet? When Yuan Xinye appears on the top of the sword, it will be as if you rejected my proposal that a Xingyang Mountain intends to live and die together with Yuan Xinye." The Emperor Bamboo was silent. The green shirt not far away in the eyes of Emperor Bamboo pointed to his head. "Do you think I can only play this?" The man asked himself and answered, "It's really just a few innocent tricks, not worth mentioning. It's okay, then I will let you Xingyang Mountain, using your best principles for the 2,600 years since you opened the mountain. The truth is back to you." Mountain climbing alone does not count because Lu Xianying was dragging Xianxia, who was seriously injured and passed out into a coma. At the peak of this line, Bikuj www.bikuj. Exu, Xingyang Shanzu Shirtang Qin Pingon and Lu Xianying met. Lu Xianying threw that Xianxia on the square casually, looked at the smiling guy at the door and smiled angrily. I will ask the sword next time. If I listen to your hiking, I will have your last name. Qin Pingon smiled and said, you can find a place to drink and then it's my turn to ask the sword. Lu Xianying picked Zhang's case and sat down to drink and gnaw the fruits. The white-robed old ape came from the back sword peak, and his figure crashed to the ground. Qin Pingon. Lu Xianying. Lu Xianying said angrily, put Lao Tzu's name ahead. Qin Pingon turned his head and glanced at the bamboo emperor who had just gotten up in the patriarch hall. The emperor bamboo stepped out of the patriarch hall with a complex expression. Yuan Xingye, from now on, you will no longer be enshrined by Xingyang Mountain. The white-clothed old monkey grinned and said, Emperor Bamboo, you say it again? Just as Emperor Bamboo was about to speak, Qin Pingon retracted his gaze and waved his hand. It's late. Qingshan carried the sword on his back, shrank the mountains and rivers in one step, and the long sword came out of his back clanging, and went to the gate of Yixianfengshan first. Standing on the edge of the Jianding cliff, Qin Pingon always held his sleeves with both hands, looking at the old ape in white. Continue to serve as your mountain guard. With a lightly tapped toe, Qin Pingon leaned back slightly, swept back like a rainbow and drew an arc in the air. Finally, Qin Pingon landed on the long sword, and the imperial sword hovered at the gate of the first line of peaks. Over the full moon peak, an old man with a rickety figure appeared out of thin air. After holding his hands, he smiled and said, Luopa Mountain Wu Fu Zhu Lian. Above Qinggu Peak, a young woman said calmly, First disciple Wu Fu Pei Qian. On the side of Shuilong Peak, there appeared a young man in white clothes rising in the wind, smiling and saying, Proud student Tui Dongshan. Anyway, if Chao Qingqing is not here today, this kid is not suitable to show up for the time being. Next to the white-clothed boy, stood a black-clothed girl holding a green bamboo hiking stick, raised her head high and said loudly, Luopa Mountain Right Guardian Zhou Mili. A middle-aged man in a blue shirt and long coat stood above Pianchi Peak, smiling and saying, The chief worshipper of Luopa Mountain Zhou Fei. An extremely handsome young sword fairy with a warm voice on the peak of Qiongji introduced himself. Second seat worship sword repair Miyu. All the sword repairs on Yunfeng and Pianyufeng were dull and speechless. Pian Mountain Sword Immortal Yumi. This person is extremely powerful, killing the demon easily cut off at every turn, or split with a sword light. In the early years on the battlefield of Old Dragon City, the sword fairy was born, second only to Taoist fairy King Chao Rong. A woman with an extremely beautiful face and cold eyes, standing above Yujiao Peak, said calmly, Jianxiu Sui right. Is that the sword immortal of the Real Realm sect who kills his sword on the battlefield? How did you become the sword repairman of Luopa Mountain? An old gentleman with a polite manner appeared elsewhere, smiling and saying, Wu Fu Plant Autumn. This person seems to have appeared on the Xia battlefield. Zhulian, Pei Qian and Planting Autumn, these three pure martial arts in the Fallen Mountain can all hang in the air. This means that at least the three of them should be Wu Fu in the far travel territory. This Pei Qian used to have a pseudonym, Xing Qian. Which Xing Qian? Which one can it be? It's the female martial artist who asked Chao Ci for 4 rounds. No one feels ashamed of losing 4 games with Chao Ci. On the contrary, it will make people feel awe. First, not everyone dares to challenge Chao Ci. Second, if any martial artist asks for a punch, does Chao Ci definitely receive it? Third, Xing Qian asked 4 times, but Chao Ci actually took all of them. A tall woman in a snow-white robe smiled and whispered softly, The law of the Fallen Mountain Palm long life. The white-haired boy of the Wawaishan demon, and Shuro borrowed her second skin bag and a pair of eyeballs rolled around. She was a pretty good-looking woman, but she looked thief, but she said proudly, Landless rock shopkeeper. Today it is relatively convergent, only showing the appearance of Yupujing. Qin Lingjun overlooked the water dragon peak at his feet and said with a sneer, Remember, I come from Luopa Mountain. My surname is Qin Jingqing. A Yuan Ing realm water dragon full of rich water transport stood in the sky above Qiongji Peak, only to give a name, Hongxiao. She seemed to say one more word, wishing to dig a hole in The lord of the Fox country who should have belonged to Qingfeng City unexpectedly showed up. Since the registration number, she is naturally charming, and can be very deceptive without smiling, and slowly said, Lope Mountain. Peixiang. An old sword repairman from the Yupu realm who came to Aquarius Island to select his disciples, Yue, only felt that he was very strong today, and he did not hide his sword spirit again. The sword lifted into the air and laughed loudly. Lost, the name of the mountain is enshrined, and the sword is repaired in the jade state. Today the name is suspended upside down. Kaching? No, at least it must start with a named offering. Wei Jin noticed a line of sight, sighed, stood by the railing and said casually, Kaching Wei Jin. On the side of Bailudu the round-faced girl was a little embarrassed. What should I do? Just say Yu Qianyue, the blacksmith shop by the Longshu River? After thinking about it, she didn't show up, broke a handful of reeds and squatted by the egret ferry, boring and playing with water. Lu Xianying, a liar, there is no such thing as an ascension to the great sage who moved to the mountain. Egret crossing, the woman with a sword back has a little toe, hovering in the air, looking calm and saying, Fei Xingcheng Ning Yao. And the green shirt that was the owner of Luopa Mountain hangs the sword in the air at the gate of Xingyang Mountain, smiling. Luopa Mountain comes to watch the ceremony, and the mountain owner Qin Pingon begins to ask about the sword. Sword of Coming Chapter 822. There is still a chapter in the wee hours. Qin Pingon Julian Peiqian Tui Dongshan Zhou Mili Zhou Fei Miu Changming Qin Lingjun Zhongqiu Sui Right Hongxiao Peixiang Yi Daoxian Wei Jin Ningyao. Yixin Peak, Full Moon Peak, Autumn Mountain, Shuilong Peak, Baiyun Peak, Pianju Peak, Cheongji Peak, Yujiao Peak, Big and Small Gushan Mountain, Jiu Peak, Qinggu Peak. There is a mountain in Luopa Mountain and you can watch the peaks of Xingyang Mountain. This is an extraordinary ceremony which has never appeared in the history of Aquarius, and it may be difficult for anyone to imitate this for thousands of years. The Emperor Bamboo has already given an order that all the peaks of Xingyang Mountain have been closed, and holding a jade card he personally presides over the ancestral mountain array. The Immortal who appeared to be born from Xingyang Kendo, patrolled the new and old peaks. As far as the eye can see, there is an invisible sword energy, which smashes the mirror flowers of some other monk's magical powers. The Emperor Bamboo was also helpless about this. The ugliness of his family should not be publicized. Today it can be concealed. The white-clothed old ape stared at the sect master at the door and said solemnly, You say it again. The Emperor of Bamboo is worthy of the first-class ambition. He looked very calm and smiled. Since I didn't hear clearly, then I will say it again. From now on, Yuan Xinye will be removed from the genealogy of my Xingyang Mountain patriarch. The white-clothed old ape clenched fists with both hands, the blue veins on the back of his hand violently smeared. Emperor Bamboo, are you really going to behave like this? If you encounter a little wind and rain, you will destroy the Shanmen Foundation? You really think these two small waists can do whatever you want here? Emperor Bamboo sighed faintly in his heart. Are these two young people not enough to do what they want? When you descended the mountain that year, you, the guardian, enshrined and protected the Tao Zidao of the Qiuling Mountain and went to the Liju Cave together. Since you have all taken action, why not just kill the two boys at the same time? Are you going to leave behind troubles and affect Xingyang Mountain? As a result, both Qin Pingon and Lu Xianying are already extremely powerful sword immortals. What is the rank of Lu Xianying's natal flying sword? Xia Yunsue and the three were not able to stop, especially that Qin Pingon. Yuan Xinye didn't know how the young people were sitting in the patriarch's hall behind to drink tea, and how they played with people's hearts and applauded. Today's questioning sword, Lu Xianying, is of course terrifying, and even more terrifying is this Master Qinshan who is hiding behind the scenes and looking at everything with a smile. The lord of a sect and a mountain enshrined, the two sides who should have the same hatred and fight side by side, no one has a voice. Lu Xianying, who asked the end of the sword, sat behind the case, drinking and eating melons. I was very impressed with the Bamboo Emperor. Lu Xianying felt that this guy's temperament and face were really good for him to be a natural master. Previously at Tingjian Pavilion, Lu Xianying asked the three old sword immortals at the same time. Not only did he win, he also dragged Xia Yunsue to the top of the sword. At this moment, Xia Lao Jianxian lay comfortably on the ground and basking in the sun. While being injured and pretending to be dead while quietly healing his wounds and warming up his sword intent, he probably has to think about what to do next, how to pick up a little face from the ground. Patriarch Xia Yuntue stayed out of the matter, but Tao Yanbo and Yan Chu were desperate and hurried to the top of the sword. The two old sword immortals were followed by a large group of guests. Because they showed up early and stopped at the sword pavilion, they seemed to have to walk one way to the dark, only to be able to tide over the difficulties this time. Hearing that the Emperor Bamboo wanted to remove the name of Yuan Zhenpige's genealogy, Tao Yanbo was full of turbulent waves in his heart. He called the suzerain directly by his name and said furiously, "Emperor Bamboo, are you crazy? There is a degree, take 10,000 steps and say, even if you are the sect master of Xingyang Mountain, you are not qualified to act arbitrarily today and remove one of the mountain guardians without authorization." The Emperor Zhu looked as usual, smiled bitterly in his heart and talked about the rules of the Patriarch Hall. If one was not careful, the Patriarch Hall behind me would be gone. And the old and new peaks, only you Tao Yanbo's Qiu Lingshan have no clear relationship with Yuan Zhunfeng, but the first-line peaks are not enough. It's inevitable to hurt your muscles and bones, but it's better than changing the master and letting you start all over again. Especially without me, the Emperor Bamboo sits in Xingyang Mountain, which is destined to be difficult to weather. Waiting until the line of peaks in the blue shirt fell backwards, the sword hovered outside the gate. Some monks who had originally wanted to help Xingyang Mountain stopped quickly. Who would dare to feel bad? So in the end, Su Hun was alone, looking extremely lonely. Yu Feng rushed to Zhu Mountain and fell on the top of the sword. This made Tao Yanbo and Yan Chu a little bit more stable. There were many surprises and bad news today, and his mother finally had good news. Although Su Hun came, he couldn't hide his solemn expression, because his climbing move was desperate. Qingfeng City and Xingyang Mountain, the two new sects of Aquarius Island, are helping each other. They are both prosperous and all ruined. What's more, the one of Su Hun's body, the daughter of Su Binxian and Qiu Lingshan Tao Zi, the marriage affair, coupled with certain instructions from the Yuan family behind the scenes, did not allow Qingfeng City to be indecisive at this juncture. The Emperor Bamboo smiled to Tao Yanbo and said, "Then let's have a meeting with the Patriarch Hall first. Just nod and shake your head and there will be a result." Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, "Master Qinshan, can you wait a moment?" After a question of the sword, if the situation is unavoidable, Xianxia is willing to lead the sword. At the foot of the mountain, Qin Pingon stepped on the night cruiser with his hands under his hands. The sole of his shoe was still more than a foot high from the long sword, and he smiled and nodded. "Yes, I will give you at most one stick of incense." After that, the Emperor Bamboo immediately flew his sword and spread the letter to the sword immortal of Zhu Feng, so that all members of the Xingyang Mountain Ancestor Master Hall, no matter who worshipped the guest, immediately rushed to the top of the sword, and all the direct disciples of all the peaks and bloodlines must gather in the Tingjian Pavilion. Those groups of sword repairmen who blocked Lu Xianying's climbing on the front line of the Peak Mountain Road, those who can wake up at this moment are already sober, and those who cannot get up on their own are also supported by the elders or the same door, and they have just won the sovereign of the Bamboo Emperor. To pass the order, either go to Jianding to discuss matters, or to get together at Stop Jian Pavilion. A series of sword lights flow from the peaks, snakes, birds and birds. According to the rules of the ancestor's sword, they follow the trajectory and rush to the ancestral mountain. It's just that the sword repairers no longer have the usual way. This is a leisurely mood. After all, in the sky above the top of each mountain, there is also a bird's eye view from a sword fairy or a master of martial arts. I always feel that if I feel unsatisfactory, there will be a sword light straight down or a fist like a rainbow. So that they fell to the ground, they will only know their life and death. Among them, Bailu crossed Wei Yueshan in charge, passed Yunlu and I Yuerong, and cautiously went to Yixianfeng. The two brothers and sisters had never been so sympathetic in their lives. Qiong Jifeng's female ancestor Leng Qi is even more embarrassed. Miyu with sword aura covering the sky and sun, she consciously can't break the sword aura of Xiaoguang, not to mention that once the sword is out, wouldn't it be equal to me? Did the sword fairy ask the sword? The content of Fijian's letter had already made her tremble. Later, the sword fairy Chao Jun used 3 swords indiscriminately and cut down Qiong Zifeng's 3 treasured geomantic places, devastated and desolate. But she herself is a member of the Patriarch Hall. Qiong Jifeng's direct disciple also needs to rush to Tingjian Pavilion immediately. If she stays in the mountains, is it reasonable? Miyu hesitated whether to let the lady-in-law go to the discussion. Let it go, no face, don't let it go. It seems a bit unreasonable, seems to be deliberately making things difficult for the woman. So for a while she felt embarrassed, so she had to ask Chief Shou from her heart. Ask for advice with an open mind. Jiang Shangzhen laughed and suggested with his heart. Mizixi, how difficult is this? You might as well open a small door that allows only one person to pass through, not as high as one person. In the mountains, the warblers and swallows bow their heads and file out, like flying birds away from branches. A rare landscape picture? Suddenly Miyu, who deserves to be the chief, was indeed much better than his own this time, so he followed Zhou Fei's method to do it. That scene was indeed pitiful. At the same time Miyu squinted a pair of eyes, looked at Xianxia and the neighboring peaks, to see if there were people who were pitying and cherishing Jade. His face was angry and he felt that he was injustice for the fairies of Xianxia. Bullying. Tao Yanbo was extremely anxious. The old sword fairy of Qiu Lingshan, who was in charge of the Yishan treasury, did not expect that the Bamboo Sovereign Association would really hold the meetings of the Patriarch Hall, and he was determined to discuss matters outside the door. There are no rules, no rules, no rules, no rules and no rules. So embarrassing to hold such a meeting. The Emperor Bamboo dared to do so. It is really a thing that can be ignored. Tao Yanbo was stricken with grief and indignation. He hated the unsentimental behavior of the Emperor Bamboo today, and even the treachery of those guests who came to watch the ceremony and left. Today I didn't drink a glass of wine and didn't climb the mountain for half a step. When Jingyang Mountain was a latrine. It just seems that there are too many people who need this god of wealth of Jingyang Mountain to remember. Tao Yanbo has to pick and choose to curse, but the powerful patrol envoy Chao Ping is close to the mountain under the Jingyang Mountain. Jun Yueqing Lu Laoqing, the fairyland lord of the True Realm sect, Tao Yanbo didn't even dare to swear in his heart, only dared to slander one or two. To a large extent, Chao Ping's observation of this person was originally a congratulation from the Dali Iron Cavalry Frontier Army. What's more, Chao Ping also has the surname of Shangzhou Kingdom, who is the most famous in the world under the entire Beipingzi Mountain. In fact, it is not Song Chongjing, not His Majesty the Emperor of Dei, or even any monk at the top of the mountain, but the ancestors of Yuan and Chao. Because of the territory of one continent, from the emperor's generals to the dignitaries, to the rivers and lakes, to the rural villages, on the doors of every household, painted hanging statues of these two civil and martial gods are hung. For many southern countries that have left the Dali domain, the people are still used to hanging portraits of these two door gods. The local imperial court and government, even if they had some thoughts, did not dare to force the people to replace them with statues of the heroes of their own Wenwu temple. The mainstay of Yuan's support in the frontier army was not Yuan's son, but the general Su Gaoshan, who was promoted to the first patrol envoy of Dei in that battle by virtue of his outstanding military exploits. It is a pity that Su Gaoshan died on the battlefield, but Chao Gaopang but still alive. Tianjun Qizhen and God sect were at best unfamiliar with Jingyang Mountain, and it is unlikely that they would really care about Jingyang Mountain in the future. But the book Jianhu Zhenjingzong Zhongyue Mountain Junjinqing is firmly on the opposite side of Jingyang Mountain. This means that Jingyang Mountain Xiazong's site selection in the old Zhuing area will become extremely uncomfortable, stumble and wear small shoes. Compared to Tao Yanbo's anxious heart, the palm of Yen Chu on the side, his face was uncertain, thinking about it and worrying. There was a sudden flash of light, a little bit of a willow, the feeling of another village. The sky is falling, the tall ones are on top first, such as Sovereign Zhu Huang, Master Xianxia Yuan Zhuanfeng. In addition, the relationship between Qiling Mountain and Luopa Mountain is extremely bad, and today there is absolutely no possibility of a slight improvement. But my own Shuilong Peak, Qin Pingon and Lu Xianyang and Luopishan and Longquan Jianzong, but they have never had any grudges or grievances. The matter has come to this point. The danger is all around. In the end there is still no fixed number. It seems that the end of the sect is imminent, but no matter what, the Green Hills will not worry about no firewood, and the salute of Luopishan will be aggressive. Really smash the old and new peaks one by one, right? So is it possible to make a good plan to help one's own Shulongfeng and the Shumai Shantao that is close to oneself? A blessing in disguise? Lu Xianyang was actually injured, not lightly but not severely. Cheeky and the most common-looking female nun from Huamufeng asked her for a kerchief, tore off a piece of wrap and then raised her head. Stop the nosebleed. The only strange thing is that the two Yuan Ing Yen Chu and Tao Yanbo were dragged into a dream by himself, and after a few swords on the riverside, their injuries were far lower than expected. Lu Xianyang was too lazy to think. Just as the two old sword immortals of Jingyang Mountain, they were indeed not in a paper-cut nascent soul realm, they were still a little capable. But if it weren't for Qin Pingon, the kid said that keeping these two would be useful. Lu Xianying was ruthless. Tao Yanbo and Yan Chu would not have to climb the mountain to discuss matters. Before Qin Pingon went down the mountain, Lu Xianying had a lot of heartfelt words with him, because he was really curious about how this kid did it to make the Emperor Bamboo speak so well. What kind of ecstasy soup did you pour into the Emperor Bamboo to make him willing to take the initiative to remove the old beast from the genealogy? Let him choose one of the two. Between him and Yuan Zhinya, only one will survive. The Emperor Zhu believes. Listening to your tone, it seems you cannot believe it? Normal people don't believe me. My brain is not sick. Kill a serious suzerain? At least the fairy Chao Xunxu will not agree to this. Lu Xianying glanced at the Emperor Bamboo at that time, and felt that if this guy knew the truth he would jump and scold his mother. Even if the Emperor Bamboo is 90% sure, telling himself that he will not believe this as long as he is not 100% sure, he would rather give up a mountain protector. It sounds unreasonable, but it's actually nothing unusual, because this is why the Emperor Bamboo was able to sit there and chat with me. So as long as he sits here today, even if someone else is chatting with me, he will definitely make the same choice. Of course, this is too fast to ask you to climb the mountain. And Zifeng's fairy travels too much, it actually matters. Otherwise, I'm the only one in the Patriarch Hall, spitting and piercing my mouth. Drinking more tea is useless. The two peak masters, old Xian, who had moved Yunfeng and Pianjifeng, had already arrived at the top of the sword. Lu Xianying's impression of the so-called pure sword repairs such as Boyanfeng and Pianjifeng is actually not bad nor good. It's not bad because you don't hesitate to shoot a sword on the battlefield of Aquarius. Not good because as a sword repairer I have never been to the Great Wall of Jianqi. The Aquarius monk, from the most useless group of immortal masters on the mountain, has become the most qualified cultivator in the world to straighten his waist. Therefore, the philosophers of hundreds of practitioners and mountain cultivators are now I don't think much of the monks from other continents, but I admire the sword repairs of Luzhou and Beiju. They travel south with their swords, dare to kill and fight and die if they say they die. The first person in the north, Baishang, Li Kai of Duckweed Sword Lake, Tu Huang Tong, the master of the discipline of Huijian sect, came from the white bone sword fairy Pu Yen from the ghost mythical valley. Which one is not the sword fairy who can make the night bright like daylight? But the Aquarius monks who live in the corner don't really care about one thing, because they admire Beiju Luzhou most, especially those sword repairs, all domineering. The king and I are not afraid, and everyone dared to make swords. Only admire one place. That place is called the Great Wall of Jianqi. And with one sword repair to resist the Great Wall of Sword Qi in the world for thousands of years, even those sword repairs who have a bad impression of someone have to admit one thing. Fortunately, this someone is his own. And this person is the friend who asked Jian Zheyangshan with Lu Xianying. Lu Xianying gnawed the fruits. Situ Weining, you can actually take a step late and take a few more glances. Lu Xianying stretched out his hand to twist the kerchief that was blocking his nose, then raised his hand, waved vigorously and smiled and greeted an upper 5-level monk in the distance. City Lord Su of Qingfeng City. It seems that we have met for the first time. Hello, my name is Lu Xianying and I am very familiar with your wife and son. Qin Pingon has already told you about the ancestral scorpion in my family. Su Qingzhu can rest 100 hearts, that's what I mean. Since it's a sale, even if the price is not too fair, it is still a sale. I recognized it back then and I accept it today. Su Hun turned his head and looked at the young sword fairy who could not see the severity of his injuries. He said nothing and had nothing to talk with Lu Xianying. Lu Xianying saw him pretending to be deaf and dumb. Why, everyone is a cultivator of the Yupu realm, so you can look down on people because you are not a sword repairman. Lu Xianying didn't get angry and said, did Qin Pingon forget to remind you that it's best not to climb the mountain today, or do you think I'm unable to pass the sword on the top of the sword? In an instant by the bank of a long river, Su Hun instantly put on a scorpion armor and ran his life spells like a standing on the earth. But in a flash, Su Hun was shocked to discover that the mountains and rivers changed, and he was in a place where he did not know. The famous battlefield, looking up, is surrounded by golden armored gods whose feet are already as high as mountains. They trample on the ground. At every step, mountains are like mounds that are arbitrarily opened. These ancient gods seem to be rushing in battle, making Su Hun appearing extremely small. Just to avoid those steps, Su Hun needs to tighten his heartstrings and control his body shape constantly to fly. During the period he was swept by a foot of a towering god. Su Hun, who was unable to avoid, found that he was still standing in place, but his soul, it's like being dragged out and dragged away. The amazing sense of tearing makes Zhou Xian, who is wearing a scorpion armor, feel the pain of heartache and have difficulty breathing. This soldier, who is known for his great killing power on a continent, the monk had no choice but to cast an escape technique that he had no choice but to do. After that, every time the gods stepped on the big earthquake and tremor, it was a wave of spirits, like being in a furnace for cooking and refining. Zhou Xian knew who the real enemy was and tried his best to use his supernatural powers to observe Lu Xianying's movements, but the other party did not deliberately hide the traces at all. On the ground, Lu Xianying was able to tap on his toes and step on a transit at will. On his shoulders, even on the top of his head, the young sword immortal always smiled, as if condescending, overlooking the world, looking at Zhou Xian, who had to hide in the earth. Lu Xianying smiled and said, "I was blinded by this old Lu family's scorpion armor. If I put it on my body, I can swim for at least 1,000 years." Zhou Xian just wanted to speak. Lu Xianying had already snapped his fingers as if the whole river of time stagnated. A golden armor deity stepped on the ground with both feet, or touched the bottom with one foot and raised it with one foot. Above the ground, there is that big, the corpse of the demon is just blood flowing like a raging river rolling away, and the weapons of the gods shattered and scattered, and the golden light stretched for thousands of miles. In this still picture of the heaven and earth vision, Lu Xianying's figure fell to the ground, light stomping lightly. He said, "Zhou Xian, how about the two of us making a deal? Just follow your Qingfeng city rules, right?" Zhou Xian knew what this little was talking about. He wanted to surrender the scorpion armor that had been hardened to his life. Lu Xianying smiled and said, "If you have an opinion, there is no great sage moving to help protect the battlefield. I have to take you to a few more battlefield sites. They're all old friends." "Thank you." "You don't need to thank you. Uncle Lu works for people and has a big brain." The two words are posted kind. Originally an old account that had been cleared for 2 years, but Zhou Xian had to climb the mountain. "When I was blind, Lu Xianying really didn't see that scorpion armor. There is no such old on the mountain as you bully people." Lu Xianying couldn't help but said, taking Zhou Xian through the ancient battlefields one after another, going upstream, going further and further, and then the Lord of Qingfeng City saw who should have fallen long ago, ranking one of the 12 high positions. That is high up in the sky, just because the is so huge that Zhou Xian can see the whole picture of the other party when he raises his head. A pair of divine golden eyes, the law is strong, the golden light is shining, and the figure is as large as a star hanging in the sky. The just moved his head slightly, and the atmosphere of the avenue shifted like a star battle. It frowned slightly, as if it had seen an ant who dared to run around in the long river of time. Just being far suppressed by that great atmosphere, Zhou Xian was already bleeding from his 7 orifices in an instant, and there were countless traces of tiny tears in his body and soul. Zhou Xian didn't care about anything and shouted, "Lu Xianying, save me." Lu Xianying sat cross-legged on the canopy and shook his head, "But you don't have a friend like Qin Pingon by your side. Who will save you?" Zhou Xian almost collapsed. Even if he faced a fairyland cultivator, he wouldn't make him so desperate. He shouted, "Lu Xianying, pay you back." "Never thought." Lu Xianying twitched. "Since I have sold it to you, I have no plans to buy it back." Lu Xianying put his cheek in one hand, and looked at a high-ranking who was in charge of the thunder divisions, bringing the Zhou Xian Siamese spirit with his soul and thunderously. Of course, the injury that Zhou Xian suffered is like the need to cross the mystery for thousands of years. It is greatly discounted. Maybe there is no one in 10? Anyway, Lu Xianying himself sleepwalked in ancient times step by step, and he was careful enough. So far he has not really experienced the killing power of any high-ranking god. The most dangerous time was when he was caught by a higher-ranking god. He just glanced at him casually. Forced to fall out of his dream, he lay in bed obediently for months. The old master Qin Chunan, who carried the sun and the moon on his shoulders, used to chat with Lu Xianying, who had not recognized him at the time, with a smile. Probably the long river of time is like a knot with countless knots. There are countless knots. The ant is walking on it, life and death and flow around. Maybe the so-called pure freedom is who can leave that rope? At the top of the sword, several old sword immortals noticed the strangeness, and then Zhou Xian in Qingfeng City was like blood blooming, staggering. One of them leaned back, fell to the ground, and then struggled to get up and watch. A glance at Lu Xianying, who was still sitting idly behind the case, staggered. Zhou Xian actually left the top of the sword directly as Yufeng. Xiaoyi didn't dare to pretend to sleep anymore. Taking advantage of all his attention on Su Hua, old Xianxia struck a carp and fell to the ground, standing behind Yan Chu. Yan Zhonglu immediately moved 2 steps horizontally, then took a step back and stood shoulder to shoulder with Uncle Xia. Lu Xianying said to herself, "I'm still kind." Seeing a large number of sights coming towards him, Lu Xianying slapped the table and said angrily, "What do you look at? The road on the top of the sword is uneven," and Qingzhu Su fell to the ground by himself. "You're all different. You only watch the theater. Blame me for helping or not." Lu Xianying stretched out his hand to cover his face and nose, then hurriedly raised his head, pulled off the 2 pieces of the kerchief again to block the nosebleeds, and then immersed in eating melons and continued to squint at the excitement. That night Lu Xianying and his friend lay on a wicker chair. The guy next to him, with his hands folded on his abdomen, said that the 2 of us asked swords and cut a few people at most. Didn't make much sense. Let the sword fairies of Xinjiang Mountain, it may be more interesting to turn against each other, ask each other swords and chop the flesh and blood in people's hearts. Don't worry, the old beast must be the one who has the most swords. Yuan Xinye, who has served as a protector for Xinjiang Mountain for thousands of years, is dedicated to his work, and his hard work is second to none. He moved the mountain to the peak and protected the mountain for thousands of years. He once defeated the powerful enemies in the dark and the light. In private we still have to do the dirty work. In the end, under the eyes of everyone, on top of a beautiful celebration that originally belonged to it, it will be a field of rebellion." At that time Lu Xianying turned sideways and asked curiously, "You hate Yuan Xinye so much?" In fact, it is reasonable to say that although Qin Pingon does bear grudges, he does not have to be so dripping and not leaking. Qin Pingon was silent for a moment, shook his head, nodded again and then smiled brightly and gave Lu Xianying an unexpected and reasonable answer, which was indeed what Qin Pingon would say and do. "It almost killed you back then, so from the first day I learned boxing I began to bear grudges. I must let that beast die physically and mentally." One wave after another up again. The patriarch of the Su family in Qingfeng City, a dignified military cultivator of the Jade Pure Realm, was wounded by Lu Xianying once again. He was heroic and went to the meeting generously. He left the field sadly with his injuries. Therefore, inside and outside Xinjiang Mountain, there is an unanimous idea. Who commented on the 10 young people and 10 alternates in Aquarius? What about the eyes? Why isn't Lu Xianying the number 1 person? And the blind person of the culprit Tianwan of Zufeng is now in a house in Shilongfeng, stepping on a bench, eating the remaining half of the plate of wine and splashing crabs. Standing aside what is going on is a Dragon Gate monk who is going crazy. As the proud disciple of the Master Yan Chu, who is in charge of the important role of Yishin's spy, she can't figure out what is going on with this female patriarch today. He called himself Brother Genius, and praised himself as a great genius he has never met in 1,000 years. Then he started to say some silly things, saying that, "Brother Lu, you failed to make a comment and you can't blame me. It's okay, I saw Big Brother Lu later and I threw myself 17 or 8 big mouths as a plea." Lu Xianying's failure to be selected for the Young Ten seems to have suffered a lot of age. In fact, Tianwan's auntie made it deliberately. The person selected was the oldest, 40 years old. Lu Xianying was just 41 years old. Senior brother Zhou Xian selected 10 young people and 10 alternates behind the scenes. The younger sister Tianwan deliberately chose Lu Xianying when she was 41 years old, and she carefully selected the 2 unpredictable lists for Xinjiang Mountain. The monk who was in charge of Xinjiang Mountain's information trembled and asked, "Master Tian is here today. Is there something to discuss with the younger generation?" In the past he used to call this Tianwan by his first name, but today Tianwan is almost like a crazy woman. He is flustered. Tianwan glanced at him obliquely. Her voice was still the same, but her expression from her eyes to her face was absolutely abnormal. "Brother Genius, it is not unusual to drink and eat crabs at the same table with me. Why look down on people? Believe it or not that I am disheveled. Run out, open your throat and say you salivate beauty, drunk sex, indecent assault on me?" The Dragon Gate cultivator had to sit down tremblingly, poured a glass of wine for Tianwan for an unprecedented time, and cautiously reminded, "Master Tian, the Lord has orders, we have to go to the front-line peak." I saw that Tianwan suddenly raised her orchid finger, winking like silk. What anxious, it's not too late to leave after drinking. But it disgusted him. At the gate of Yixian Fengshan, the sword fairy in Qingshan, who said he would wait more for a stick of incense, looked around and smiled and said, "Within the rules you will do what you like." Yu glanced at Xianxia Peak at the foot of his eyes, and all the women who remained in the mountain looked up at him. Their eyes seemed to be moisturized by autumn water. I'm so angry with Yu one by one. Is I really a bachelor who is not picky? I didn't even inquire. At least half of the reason why Lao Tzu had such a bad reputation in his hometown was the jealousy of those old and young bachelors. Old Jinshu Yue was overjoyed when he heard the words and geared up. After Lu Yu left Xianxia Peak, she did not follow her master to go directly to the Zhou Xian mountain pavilion. Tremblingly asked, "Master Qin, can we go?" Qin Pingon nodded and smiled, "Of course. Yulin and Lu Yu have nothing to do with this questioning sword. The two were just thrown out by the old sword immortals like Bamboo Emperor, deliberately disgusting Lu Xianying and Longquan Jianzong. However, Lu Ye's temperament is not bad, but the Yulin in front of him, even if it is true, is very close to Xingyang Mountain, and should have been practicing here early." Qin Pingon said with the heartfelt voice of the young peak owner of the Yujiao Peak. "You don't even pretend to look the same. No wonder you will be expelled from the Longquan Jianzong. In the future you will continue to work hard at Xingyang Mountain. In the Yuaning state, learn the sword of the Taoist god of wealth Yanzhang LV, and then practice a jade puddle you can learn from Patriarch Xia again." Yulu's lips trembled and his face was blue. Before today, even if he suffered a great humiliation on the side of Longquan sword sect, after arriving at Xingyang Mountain he was still a first-class man of heaven, and he even became a golden core, a 40-year-old young man. Xian has opened the mountain rain foot peak, can collect direct disciples. Yu foot peak is a sword repair. Since then it has opened up branches and leaves, full of longing. Sooner or later he will ask Sword Dragon Spring Sword Sect and Sword God Xiushan. Qin Pingon turned his head and smiled. "Will not leave? When you leave, remember to act to the end, otherwise you will be alive and kicking, and you will have the strength to ask the sword but dare not ask the sword. In the future your reputation will not be bad." I can't get along. For the monks from all walks of life in Aquarius who didn't need to mix them up, today was simply watching the excitement from a distance, and they were full of them and they almost didn't get killed. First, the owner of Fenglei Garden, the Yellow River, appeared at Bailudu, handed out a sword from a distance. The light of the sword was scattered, and the peaks of the sword were scattered at the same time. It was like watching Xingyang Mountain for outsiders. It opened the curtain for today's ceremony. A good head. Originally there was such a landscape painting scene. It was a worthwhile trip. Even if you can't go to the mountainous mountains where you can drink, it is not a waste of trip to the Xingyang Mountain boundary. At the banquet, Xinjiao wine is wine and the market wine is also wine with different prices. One can drink fairy money and the other can also drink enough lively. Longquan Jianzong's protagonist sword repairer Lu Xianying appeared at the gate of Zhushan Mountain, asking about swords one after another, and accidents appeared one after another, making others just feel dizzy and addicted to their hearts. Qiang Zifeng Liuyu, Yujifeng Yulu, Fuliyufeng Woman, the ghosts, each with their swords, failed to stop Lu Xianying's climbing footsteps. Not only that, the two sword formations of Yunfeng and Pian Kaifeng facing Lu Xianying's questioning sword were actually papery and vulnerable. Qiu Lingshan and Shuilong Peak had two sword repairs, and they suffered heavy casualties. The fallen state of the fall, the dagger of the broken sword, and the corpse of a sword repair in the Longmen realm were directly thrown by Lu Xianying behind the foot of the mountain. And no one expected that this unknown young sword fairy from Aquarius not only succeeded in climbing the mountain, no one could stop it, but even the three old sword fairy who was responsible for guarding the sword pavilion could not stop it. Lu Xianying's climb to the top, even Xia Yunsui, the respected full moon peak old sword fairy, fell in the same situation as Yulin, but was dragged to the top of the sword by Lu Xianying. During this period, just like echoing these questioning swords, one after another Xinjia fairy boats, one by one mountain monks, either openly or quietly, left the Xingyang mountain boundary one after another. Is there such an observatory in the world? A pure martial artist and sword immortal, Yufeng hovered high in the sky, stepping on the peaks respectively. Is this unclear if you are going to move the mountain? The mountain that Luopa Mountain moved today is Xingyang Mountain. As for the sword fairy in Qingshan, who is the master of Luopa Mountain, how would he ask the sword when he appeared at the gate of the mountain? Unimaginable. With Lu Xianying asking the sword in front of each other, the spectators at Zhufeng found it hard to have a bigger surprise. After Lu Yu and Yulin left, Qin Pingon raised his head and looked at the top of the sword, discussed with the Patriarch Hall, and reminded him empathetically, a stick of incense is more than half past. The occasion of words. Above the top of the sword, a sharp sword light appeared. Even Wei Jin looked up, concentrated, and looked at the sword light, seemingly surprised. I saw the sword light the size of a mustard seed at the beginning, and instantly stretched out the brilliant sword light with an aura like a rainbow, all straight, spreading swiftly in all directions. Then a sword light hung and stopped at the same time, a total of 10 snow-white straight lines faintly visible, the stagnant place condensed A, B, C. Ren Kue, a total of 10 sword chi condensed into small letters, golden light shining, bright eye-catching. The 10 golden words with strong sword intent began to rotate slowly, and the 10 long lines of sword light turned along with them, casting slender shadows on the peak of Xianxia mountain. After that was the second time the sword light shot all around. This time it was the evolution of the swordsmanship of the 12 earthly branches. 12 sword light trails were subdivided, each with text, to control those swords that were a few feet shorter than the heavenly stem. The long line of light began to rotate in an orderly manner, which made 12 negligible but extremely thrilling cool shades, above the peak of the first line. Immediately afterwards, the sword light at the center of the circle splits out 24 sword lights and blooms outwards in a straight line. At the top of the sword light, there is a golden text with 24 solar terms hovering suddenly, and compared the pure straight lines of the heavens, the stems of the earth and the earth. When these words appeared, there was a sword that seemed to reach the realm of heaven and humans, revealing the scene of 24 different solar terms in the 4 seasons of the year. After that, there are still 28 sword lights tossed up like 28 constellations. The rows of stars revolve in the sky, eventually forming a circular galaxy. After that, there are 36 peaks, manifested and born like a mirage, standing in the sky divided by sword light. Then there is the chronology of 60 jiazi like a weird accountant, arranging the years between the world and the earth. There are still 72 sword lights, like rivers that have been drawn from the 3 continents, and then by the Immortals, they will forcibly straighten the winding waters with great magical powers. After that, it was the 108 shortest straight lines of sword light, and finally passed through the golden text on the top that looked like 108 orbs, and once again connected into a circle. Circles of sword light, layered on top of each other, densely packed. The sword energy is heavy, covering the sky and the sun, and the sword intent is vast and orderly. One person asked the sword arrayed in the sky. So that the entire Xinjiang Shanzu Mountain Jianding and Tingjian Pavilion, all the monks were shrouded in the shadow of sword light. When it comes to creating his own fist, Qin Pingon is a bit inferior to that of the Gongda Lin Wenquan, who claims to be less than 30 in his new fist. But Lao Tzu is a sword repairer. Do you Chao Ci have the ability to create a sword trick to try? Qin Pingon thought for a while as if this was too shameless and he couldn't take his friend Chao Ci to compare. Suddenly taking a step, Qin Pingon lifted his arm, put his fingers together and gently touched the white jade hairpin in the bun. At the top of the sword, the discussion has already started. The matter discussed is very simple. They each expressed their opinions and nodded, indicating that they agreed to remove Yuan Zini's name on the Xinjiang Mountain Jinyu genealogy, shaking his head and expressing rejection. But some patriarchs hesitated and were very unprofitable. Qin Pingon took a step back and reached out to hold the hilt of Yu's sword. It was only afterwards that Mr. Qi had said to the mountain-moving ape that when he was young, he would step on Xinjiang Mountain if he left Lizhu Cave. Qin Pingon took a deep breath, his figure slightly rickety so he was too much relaxed and muttered, "Then go one." Holding a night tour, sweeping with a sword, the sword light blooms and a line cuts across the foot of Xinjiang Mountain, directly cutting off the roots of an ancestral mountain in Xinjiang Mountain. Not only that, Qin Pingon held a sword in his right hand, pointed at the mountain gate with the tip of the sword, and knocked on the hilt with his left hand. The entire first-line peak was provoked, several feet above the ground. Then the sword formation in the sky was slightly reduced in size, and then crashed to the ground with a thunderous momentum, instantly smashing the entire Jianding Patriarch Hall, dusty and shocking the world. You just continued to discuss matters. I opened the peak first, then picked the mountain and demolished the Patriarch Hall. Sort of coming Chapter 823. Cheeky, let's talk about the 8 to 14 physical books of Jianlai. They should be available in JD. Com, Dang Dang and Wenshuan, and there may be signed books because at that time, they were required to sign a full 2,000 copies. Signature. This Mount Xinjiang, which has the largest number of sword repairs on a continent, Is not the Great Wall of Small Sword Qi in Aquarius? The younger generations of sword repairers of the old and new peaks of Xinjiang Mountain all believed so sincerely, and many of the fairy sects outside Xinjiang Mountain were also so compatible. In fact, there is no impression of the Great Wall of Sword Qi in the sky, as well as the farther ascending city, the Aquarius genealogical master and Shanzhe Yishio. If it weren't for the tour in the Wei and Jin dynasties, and the tragic war that hit the entire Howran world afterwards, the monks on the mountain would only talk less about the Great Wall of Jianqi. And the sword top formation on the first-line peak of Xinjiang Mountain, isn't it hailed as another imitating white jade capital? Can you kill the fairyland practitioner casually? Almost all the people who watched the ceremonies from the peaks had previously looked up at the incredible floating sword formation. The weather was so varied and the movement was so loud that no one could help but watch the spectacular and thrilling scene. What kind of high-level, how much sword aura, and how to cultivate the heart, can we create this magnificent sword formation that resonates with the world? When in Aquarius Island outside of the Fengxue temple in the Wei and Jin dynasties, there was a sword fairy like Lu Xianying who was flying swords and seeing who fell to the ground, and there was also such a sword fairy with outstanding swordsmanship and superb skills. In the end, only a few lucky ones saw Qin Pingon at the foot of the mountain falling to the ground, holding a long sword in his hand. The sword light suddenly appeared, first an arc flashing away, and then the young sword fairy cut the root of the mountain. Knock on the hilt again, a sword provokes the peak of the mountain as if effortlessly. Therefore only those who saw the sword formation hit the ground, all of them hated the long river of time and couldn't reverse the flow, and couldn't see the real sword of the sword fairy in the green shirt at the foot of the mountain. Isn't it a good idea to ask Xinjiang Mountain for the sword after a stick of incense? The Lord of the Fallen Mountain, what he said doesn't count. Worthy of being a mountain sword fairy. Before Qin Pingon asked the sword without warning, especially since the sword formation had not appeared before. In general, the attention of the spectators was still on the various people from the Luapa Mountain. Higher on the peak of Full Moon Peak, Zhou Xian, the old butler who was the first to speak, is short and plain, but he is clearly a martial artist in the mountain world with his skills. He is condensed into substance with his strong fist, like water flowing down and scattered. Such as the fairy crushing white clouds everywhere in the sky. This person is in Luapa Mountain. What kind of identity is this person the first to show up for his name? Couldn't it be that Chao Xuanshou was willing to give Lupashen's face like this because he was born as a martial artist in the frontier army of Dali? God knows this Luapa Mountain is really covered by clouds and mist, too awkwardly hidden. It is simply rising up inexplicably. Could it be that Luapa Mountain is a mountain supported by Dali in secret, and it is bright and dark with the Longquan sword sect of Saint Ruan? In that case, does it make sense that Chao Xuanshou left earlier? Located on the Qinggu Peak on the edge of the Xinjiang Mountain boundary, a young woman with a bun tied into a ball, a major disciple of the Kaishan Pei Qian. She is already the newest martial artist in Aquarius, but she is temporarily in the remote travel realm. In accordance with the rules of the teacher, the samurai must fall 2 or 3 times first to travel down the mountain and treat others with sincerity. It's really Xianxia. First he fisted to kill the demon in Jinjiasu, then he asked Duduan Chao Ci about the fist, and then returned to our hometown and caught up with the battle on the battlefield of Paidu. It is a pity that I heard a lot of punches, but it is difficult for outsiders closer. It's mostly a glimpse because I have a friend on the mountain who was fortunate to have seen this great female master punch with my own eyes. I heard that it is extremely overbearing. He punches a demon clan and never has a whole body. Specially select those large hinterland where the monster race is densely packed, and punch down the battlefield with a radius of tens of meters. The world will be clear in an instant. In the end, only Xingqian can stand. Therefore it is rumored that she is now among the mountain monks. There are already 2 nicknames of Xing Qingming and Xing Seiqian, which roughly means that wherever she goes, it is like throwing paper money during the Qingming festival, and there are dead people all around. Everyone, imagine if it were you. Am I against her? It's conceivable that Zhejiangshan has kicked the iron plate today. It's not good to provoke a great master like Xingqian. But she said that she was the great disciple of the mountain, and she was the martial arts biography of the young mountain master of the mountain? But is the mountain master clearly a sword fairy? How to teach her boxing? Most of it is that there is another expert in Luapa Mountain who teaches boxing. She just followed the young mountain master to go up the mountain to practice. In fact, she has no identity. It is extremely Otherwise the mountain lord who is still very young heard that he is both a land sword fairy and a martial artist of the 9 realms. It would be too unreasonable. In the sky of Shuilong Peak, Tui Dongshan, who claims to be the proud student of the mountain lord, is a white-clothed boy with a red mole on his eyebrows. He has also fallen a bit today, showing only the appearance of a jade monk. The right guardian Zhou Mili of the Luopa mountain beside him, this little girl in black who is not high in realm, has an unfathomable realm, and is the only visitor who only cultivates in the cave. All fools know that this right guard must not be underestimated. After all, this little girl who seems to be of a water descent spirit according to her identity, but what kind of mountain protection of the fallen mountain, the world's famous mountain fairy mansion, can serve as the existence of the mountain protection, often like the Master Zhonglu within the mountain gate? The best fight is just one to defend against the enemy from the outside and the other to control the rules and precepts of the patriarch hall internally. Is it probably because she disdains to observe Xingyang Mountain with a true state today? On the side of Pianjiao Peak, Zhou Fei, who claims to be the chief worshipper, looks like a student in the lower reaches of the mountain, but although his temples are frosty and white, he is still romantic in his blue shirt. Apart from his back sword, he still has a long sword with his foot on his feet. Sword fairy style. The long sword on the back was named Jiawasheng, borrowed by Chief Zhou and Brother Cui. This one under his feet, Jiang Shangzhen acquired from a secret house in Luzhou, Beiju named Tian Broom. Borrowing the sword with Tui Dongshan, then when returning the sword he must also give the broomstick. Jiang Shangzhen naturally has no objection to this. In the words of Brother Cui, it is that I and Chief Zhou are close friends who have changed lives. Don't be polite with Chief Zhou, and when Chief Zhou is polite with me, let alone be polite. Lu Laoqing, Lu Zhimao, Li Fuchong, the 2 masters of Xinjing sect, actually did not leave Xingyang Mountain too far, and they were still paying attention to the situation of Xingyang Mountain. When they saw this person far away, the 3 of them had only wry smiles. The first suzerain in the history of Zhenjingzong, the old suzerain of Yuguazong, has never done things so unreasonably. Even if Lu Laoqing and Lu Zhimao are fierce generations of wild cultivation, they have also entered the upper 5 realms. Jiang Shangzhen, there are still the slightest extra distracting thoughts and he dare not have it. It is powerful and can't be beaten. If it is intrigue, it is far worse. Qiong Jifeng, the sword immortal of the Jade Pure realm, had a young face and an unusually handsome appearance. When she narrowed her eyes, she was fascinated by her sight. The key is that this second person enshrines a magnificent sword aura like a waterfall hanging down the sky, and the sky is shining, covering the entire Cheongji Peak under his feet, and finally 2 long rivers of sword aura of the same origin and different streams, lingering around Cheong respectively. The branch peaks, one high and one low, slowly revolve around the mountain peaks, making a mountain boundary halfway up the mountain, and the morning glow sword gas glows with layers of golden light. Near the top of the mountain, the sunset glow is gorgeous like a fire, and the sword gas is so abundant and still not hurt the slightest. So that Lung Qi, the female ancestor of Qiong Jifeng, could only take her direct descendants, holding their breath one by one, and walking through the small door with their heads down. Qiu Lingshan, a tall woman who claims to be in charge of a long life, is dressed in a white robe and has a vague style. The place where she stands is overflowing with brilliance, and she is an unquestionable fairy. Shuilong Peak, Qin Lingjun, who looks like a child in Tsing-yi, stepped on a Dragon King basket that was made for his life, with arms around his chest as long as he leaves the small town of Liju Cave, where is Uncle Qin not uncle. Qin Lingjun felt sorry in his heart. Brother Jia, busy and vain, Qin Zhuolio, these good friends, good brothers, none of them were present today and they had never seen their heroic appearance. It was a pity in their lives. A martial artist planting autumn, the old master's martial arts realm is not high in Luopa Mountain, it is just a bottleneck in the remote travel realm, but at the same time planting autumn is a golden core monk who is proficient in Confucian energy training. In the past years in the lotus roots in that hometown, Nanyuan Guosher, who was praised by the rivers and lakes as the master of the literary sage, was indeed very likely to make this statement worthy of the name in the even more vast world. Yujiao Peak, on the right of Jianxiu Sui, one day before, during a bright moon night, she made a night swim in the Shujian Lake and quietly entered the Yuan Ying realm. Shi Rou, the shopkeeper who was settled by an ascending alien demons, is standing above Zhiyu Peak, riding the dragon lane and wearing Shi Rou, who has been wearing Du Mao's legacy for many years, taking this opportunity to finally see the day again as a woman. The scenery seen in the eyes of the Huai Tianma is as clear as Shiro in Qilong Lane, even clearer than the view of the mountains and rivers in the hands of gods. The entire Xinjiang mountain boundary is captured by them. Hongxia of the Yuanying stage Water Jiao only felt that standing here today was the only embarrassing existence to make up the number. Speaking of realm, Hongxia is indeed a few levels higher than the little girl in black, but she is the only one in the world because of her own downfall. What a strange style, and she never looks at this anyway. Besides, how dare Hongxia follow Zhou Mili? The right guardian is on par. So Hongxia made up her mind anyway after the ceremony. After returning home, she hid in the lotus root blessed land, and would not go out again until Yupu. The appearance of Yuanying Peixiang, the lord of the Fox country, was also among the guests from the peaks of Xinjiang mountain, making a lot of noise, calling friends to whisper and talk. Isn't the Su clan of Qingfeng City always the most determined mountain ally of Xinjiang mountain? Could it be that Qingfeng City also secretly turned to Luopa mountain? This Xinjiang mountain, which is about to start the next sect, is it possible that the first line of Fengzhu Shitang's sacred incense and burning incense year after year are all fake incense? Respect the past ancestors who hang on the statues are so stingy with ancestors, and are not willing to shelter future generations at all? Otherwise, why have you fallen to such a situation where enemies are made everywhere and surrounded by groups of enemies? And how many allies does Luopa Mountain have? Damn it, don't you always say that Luopa Mountain is just under Wei Shanjun, a vassal sect who helps Piyin Mountain to make money and launder money? As for Pei Xiang herself, it was relieved. The fox charm who had been stagnating in the nascent soul realm for a long time, until this moment had clarified the identity of the worship of Luopa Mountain, and completely tore her face with Qingfeng City in public. On the contrary, her Taoist heart became clear and transparent. Vaguely in between, there was a sign of loosening of the bottleneck, so that Pei Xiang was immersed in the mysterious Taoist rhyme of that great opportunity. The foxtails behind him involuntarily slammed apart, only to see the beauty of Yuanying Dixian. Suddenly as big as a mountain, 7 giant foxtails slowly drifting with the wind, dragging out bursts of dazzling streamers. The picture is like a dream. That blatantly claimed pseudonym is enshrined in the upside-down Luopa Mountain. Looking at the posture, it seems that it is another sword fairy in the Jade Pure realm. Either one taken out alone is thrilling enough, but today is different. None of these seem to be anything. It is the last 2 people who really made all the guests in Aquarius, even all the monks from other continents who watched this celebration through Jinghua Shuiyue feel shocked. Feishu Temple Weijin. Senshin City Ningyao. Kuqing Weijin. This self-reported title and name of the great sword immortal of Fengshui Temple, and the well-deserved first person in Aquarius swordsmanship, stood on the Dali Ferry near the Yixian Peak at this moment, standing by the railing. Go to the Great Wall of Jianqi to kill demons and ask Jiantianjin to thank you for 2 games. Can be said that the realm, prestige and killing power of the Wei and Jin dynasty, he is alone, just like a sect. If the Wei and Jin dynasties were not because of their lack of temperament, 2 lonely clouds and wild cranes, and their whereabouts were uncertain, otherwise as long as he was willing to start a sect, he could do it casually, and he was destined to have no shortage of disciples. Fizi, assuming they can choose the mountain, will inevitably abandon the Longquan Jianzong and Xinjiang mountain, and take the initiative to practice swords following the Wei and Jin dynasties. The reason is very simple. The swordsmanship of Aquarius Island was provoked by the Wei and Jin dynasties. It was the Wei and Jin dynasties who let the monks of the 3 continents know about it. I also have sword immortals on the top of the Aquarius continent, and I don't lose to other continents. And on the side of Bailudu, the woman carrying the sword box, Ningyao? The Great Wall of Sword Qi and Ningyao, who is the 5th world? It is impossible. Just to say one thing, she went to a brand new world. How did she come here? Did the Confucian temple make an exception for her? Or is she flying up with the sword by her own ability? So if you want to use your ass, most of them have the same name and surname. Moreover, the appearance of the woman with the back sword and the hovering of Yufeng were not very dynamic, and it was even far worse than the 3 sword immortals of Mi Yu Sui right side and Yu negation. Standing next to Wei Jin, Yu Huiting asked in a soft voice, Wei Shishu? Is he really the one from the Great Wall of Jianqi? She knew that guy, and he first met in the mountains and rivers. At that time, this person was with a group of ladies in the Changchun Palace. She also claimed to know Shishu Wei. At that time, she mistakenly thought she was a glib person. Later, this person sneaked to Shishu Wei's Xianxia. The mountain owner clearly discovered the thief of the Wanyan pine branch, but still did not stop it, and during the conversation, it seemed that the sword repairman was quite jealous, and he believed that it was a sword immortal in the Yupu realm. Yu Huiting was only skeptical at the time, maybe this person really recognized Wei Shirshu. Wei Jin nodded and said, yes. Mi Yu is outstanding in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and his cultivation aptitude is considered to be outstanding. It is just that Mi Yu used to wield swords and has always been a cocoon. Mi Yu in the two realms of the earth and Mi Yu in the jade is a world. Yu Huiting couldn't help but look at the young woman at Bailu. Uncle Wei, who is she? Wei Jin said calmly, if you don't believe it, ask yourself. Yu Huiting made a gesture to Yu Feng to leave. Shirshu Wei Jin was indifferent, and she had to put away the air ripples in anguish. She just asked softly, Uncle Wei wants to follow the sword? Wei Jin said helplessly, need it. Yu Huiting was puzzled. After all, there is an immortal condensed from multiple kendos on the top of Xingyang Mountain. Wei Jin shook his head. As long as Ning Yao makes a sword, his finger will be broken. Wei Jin, who didn't like to talk, added another sentence. What's more, our hermit who has never lost a drink will not give Xingyang Mountain this opportunity. Yu Huiting was shocked. Hidden official? Wei Jin said in surprise, don't you know? Yu Huiting's face was aggrieved. How do you know? Wei Jin no longer speaks. It is really annoying. You should go to the Great Wall of Jianqi earlier and ask Mr. Zhou for swordsmanship so that you won't be bothered. Wu Tijing had been hiding in the dark before, and the sword was extremely decisive. It was almost when Lu Xianyang went to stop the sword pavilion, Wu Tijing almost simultaneously took out the sword with Xia Yunsui in the Yupu realm. For the time being, this realm was just a young sword repairer of the Golden Core. Not only did he sacrifice the natal flying sword named Yuanyang, he also sacrificed the second flying sword with 2 natal magic powers. Both of these magical powers are unreasonable, and they can help oneself temporarily break through the realm, and can also build a mysterious longevity bridge. In the past, Wu Tijing was equivalent to building an illusory longevity bridge between himself and Tao Yanbao and Yan Chu. Therefore, once anyone suffers a fatal injury, they can share the injury equally. At least there is no worry about life. For Wen Jian, who is on the front line of life and death, this is simply an unreasonable hand that can change the outcome of life and death. Never thought, but in the end it didn't work, so Lu Xianyang went on climbing. Wu Tijing wiped his face was blood-stained. It was the Mandarin Duck Flying Sword's injury counterattack. This slight injury does not hurt the main road. Wu Tijing did not take it seriously. The real worry is through this fate Fei Jian saw 2 women. In an instant Wu Tijing seemed to be peeling away from his soul, standing in the sea of clouds, looking up, facing the golden eyes of the real dragon. Even if he squinted his eyes, it or she, that strong atmosphere of great luck in the body is still suffocating. The other one seemed to be in the midst of a bright moon in the sky. Underneath her feet was a strange world, and the person she saw was a round-faced woman with extremely clear face and figure. She was not angry, just feeling curious, and blinked her eyes. Seems to be asking who you are. Therefore Wu Tijing had already collected the sword almost instantly. This time I came out of the sword and went against my heart. It was only as a patriarch's genealogy monk, and had to hand out 2 swords to the teacher. When the sword was at the top of the bamboo, emperor threatened to remove the white-clothed old ape from the genealogy. Wu Tijing extremely disappointed. This kind of swordsmanship is not worthy of being his own preaching teacher. After going to Jiyu Peak, Wu Tijing did not find the Tianwan who took him up the mountain. He left a letter and thanked her as a thank you to Tianwan for taking his own mountaineering practice. I went to Xiaogu Mountain again and saw Sujia. I don't know why, but I always feel familiar. Although Wu Tijing is withdrawn, he is very talented in practice. He seems to be born with him, knowing that this is a mountain. Some of his long-cherished wish and fate are somewhat implicated in his previous life, but Wu Tijing didn't think that because of a woman her own sword practice could be dragged down. In the end, this talented sword repairman, who was only at the top of his age, simply left Xingyang Mountain quietly, intending to become a mountain and wild repairer in a Yunshui career. Where to practice swords is not to practice swords. The Emperor of Bamboo taught swordsmanship. Wu Tijing didn't think there was any greatness. Once he learned it, he didn't think it would be of any benefit. As for whether the Emperor Bamboo is private, there is the superior swordsmanship that has not been taught yet. Wu Tijing doesn't care at all about it, he doesn't need to learn it. Wu Tijing's figure turned into a ray of sword light and walked quietly. Suddenly stagnated. because Wu Tijing keenly noticed that an unusual light appeared in the shade of a tree in front of him. It was a moonlight that should never appear at this hour. On the side of Bailudu, a girl with a round face who is idle, while pouring water with reeds, asked casually, "Who are you? Where are you going?" Wu Tijing appeared in shape and simply said neatly, "Wu Tijing, ready to travel out of the mountains." The woman's voice was just "oh," and there was no more. Wu Tijing waited for a long time, but after the moonlight dissipated, there was no more movement. But just as Wu Tijing was about to start again, a little moonlight condensed in the shade of the trees elsewhere. "Why are you still in a daze? I won't stop you. I have no grievances or hatreds, but I have to remind you. You are a person who is away from home. Don't make a sword like this because I am not a sword repairer, am I?" Wu Tijing is not a suspicious person. If the other party doesn't have these words, Wu Tijing will leave after saying that, but the more the other party's words, the more they seem to not intend to give up, so Wu Tijing does not hold his breath. To prepare for the opponent's non-relenting competition, after all, it is indeed the opponent who is in charge, and Wu Tijing feels that it makes sense. Wu Tijing thought about it briefly, and the sword light fell straight down everywhere. Among all the shadows of vegetation, trees, mountains and rocks, there was sword light that shattered the shade. The last sword light slowed down slightly, intentionally or unintentionally, and then fell in his own shadow. At Bailuda's credit month he wondered, "Are you sick? Sword repair is great." Wu Tijing frowned and said, "Do you want to stop me?" Xia lost the reed in his hand, got up and smiled. "It's nothing but 3, hurry down the mountain." Wu Tijing no longer hesitated, her figure turned into a ray of sword light, and she left Xingyang Mountain. Ning Yao noticed the situation on the side of Xieyu and asked in his heart, "What's the matter?" The round-faced girl hurriedly waved her hand. Haha said with a smile, "It's okay." Ning Yao said, "Just say anything, you're welcome." Hua said quickly, "That must be." Ning Yao thinks that this credit month matches Lu Xianying quite well. He has a big heart and he likes not to see outside. The old mountain master of Xianxia Mountain, who has already withdrawn from the boundary of Xingyang Mountain, has been watching the mountains and rivers. On the top of the sword, the scene of Su Hun falling to the ground is really shocking. The old fairy sighs, "Jin Jian, I'm fortunate to listen to your advice as a teacher. Otherwise, I'll follow in the footsteps of Qingfeng City Su Hun. It doesn't matter what the honor and disgrace of my life and death alone. Once Xianxia Mountain is affected, I may have to abandon all my previous work and have no hope of becoming a sect. Dangerous and dangerous, very lucky." Kai Jinjian just hummed, her expression complex, raised her hand and rubbed her neck. In the alleys of the past years, she was accidentally obliterated by a young man in the alley with broken porcelain. After she left the Liju Cave of Heaven alive, there were a lot of opportunities. First, she unexpectedly succeeded in becoming a member of the Golden Corps Kaifeng, and becoming a member of the Yunxia Mountain Patriarch Hall. Then, as a monk, she walked on the ascending platform opened by the Dali court. After being able to break through the realm and enter the nascent soul realm, even at the foot of the mountain he would be honored as an old ancestor. Moreover, on the Sherman Mountain, there is the view of the Sea of Clouds. The Sea of Clouds is surging, and the clouds and mists are especially extraordinary. They are known as the stunners in the sky, with the aura of heaven and earth. Kai Jinjian has another blessing, and now there is no suspense. Yunxia Mountain was appointed as the Lord of the Mountain, because after the master had decided to observe the ceremony, he would close his life and death. Either he would break the bottleneck and become a jade, or he would be disbanded. No matter what, he would fight for the title of the sect. So Kai Jinjian would take advantage of the opportunity to take over the post of Mountain Lord. In less than 30 years, Kai Jinjian seemed to be dreaming. It's just that she often thinks of someone as if she doesn't want to think less, but she doesn't dare to think more. The Zhuo Lang from the Ministry of Rights in Dali capital, Dong, who stood on the side of the ferry observation deck, worried, and the old man lost his heart as soon as the patrol envoy Chao Ping left. In fact, this old attendant is not unfamiliar with Lu Xianying and Chen Pingyan. On the contrary, the old man was deeply impressed by the two young people in the small town. At that time he was the official of the Ministry of Rights who visited the Liju cave for the imperial court. At that time he was the servant of the right who was responsible for rubbing the monument to the archway building. Now he has only changed a word, changed from right to left year after year. Becoming an old servant, the old man has been accounted for in that ceremonial office in his entire life. In his early years he served as the official of the official department of Dali for a few years. It is not a promotion but a smooth officialdom. He is regarded as a mature and respectful old man from the Beijing Rights Department. Bring the vigorous young people around so as not to be too radical and lose sense. Later when Lu Qingfeng took office he gave up his position. When the war ended, Dong Hu successfully won a bachelor's title, but unfortunately he was not among the 6 palaces and 6 pavilions. The old man is very familiar with what Luopeishan and Nipping Lane are. The first time I saw the 2 boys in the blacksmith shop by the river, especially Qin Pingon, he was only a black and thin boy back then. A few bags of hard-earned gold and copper coins quietly became the masters of the 5 hills to the west. But when the boy climbed out of the well with a basket of dirt on his back, he probably saw a group of officials with strange faces. He was a bit embarrassed at the time. At that time it was very simple and honest. Therefore it can be said that Dong Lao Shilang, who was at the center of the Dali imperial court, was watching how the boy in Niping Alley bought the mountain step by step with a few bags of gold and copper, and leased it to the Saint Wanqiong, and how he played chess. Dunshan Weibo got acquainted and finally chose Luopa Mountain as the ancestor mountain. He founded the mountain and established a school. With the Nujiashan ferry, the young mountain owner went on a few long trips, constantly buying more mountains and attracting more people to the mountain. Therefore the old man is now worried about his own situation and is a little gloating. Before Xinjiang Mountain was listed as the head of the sect, it was another colleague of the Ministry of Rites who had worked together for many years and was responsible for presiding over the ceremony. Last time, Qingfeng City was just a servant of the Ministry of Rituals of the Dali capital. Either the Shang Shu from the Ministry of Rites at the accompany capital came forward, or it should be him. As a result, on the side of Luopa Mountain, he ignored the Dali imperial court, so the right servant of the Ministry of Rites, a former protege, had to call him a little, who taught him to laugh at himself at the wine table. Dong Hu planned to wait and see again, wait for the Zhengyangshan Council to discuss a result, and wait for Qin Pingon to finish asking the sword before making a decision. As for certain hints of the Empress Dowager Dali, and certain explicit statements of the Yuan family in the Shangzhou Kingdom, they can be taken seriously or not. If the Beiju Luzhou, the neighbor to the north, is the continent most qualified to be arrogant among the vast 9 continents, and Tonghishao, which was once south, is the one with the deepest heritage, then in that battle before, the mountains and rivers were the smallest and the most pitiful in Aquarius. It was a small place that couldn't be built in a nest. The mountains were low and the water was shallow. I wanted to be scolded by monks from other continents. Can't do it. Therefore, Aquarius is the least concerned about the situation on the mountains of other continents, and the least being taken seriously by the monks of other continents. Of course, today is different from the past. The cultivators have a high-sightedness and a big tone. A long line of spectators, men, women and children, but all of them are the genealogy masters on the mountain. At the moment they are all on the railing to watch the excitement. Someone sneered, whispered a little bit and spoke fair words, saying that this fallen mountain is just a domineering generation, so aggressive and domineering, how can it last for a while? Maybe after a while the situation will be turned upside down, and the sword tops will be sacrificed by the Xinjiang mountain. 2 sword lights flashed. What kind of young sword fairy, even if it is not dead, will fall out of the peak? Friends on the side laughed, but they didn't. They showed up one by one and didn't know where they came from. Self-registration number as a canteen buddy, tell us the name of the dish? Someone was curious to ask, is there such a mountain near the Nujiashan ferry on the edge of Luopa Mountain, Beiwei Piyun Mountain? But there is already Wei Shanzhen's Piyun Mountain and Ruan Shengren's Longquan Jianzhong. How could it be possible to accommodate such a huge Xianxia mountain? Someone nodded in agreement, agreeing, saying that according to common sense, the old Lizhu cave took root and was reduced to the rank of blessed land, supporting a Kendo sect. How could it run out of landscape heritage? Probably it's meaningless to chat like this. Someone immediately continued the previous topic and said with a smile that these masters from the Luopa mountain were not sword immortals, or martial masters, or they were Shanzi spirits and monsters who had a sense of proof. Anyway, they are all terrific land gods and they are not allowed to show off. Suddenly somebody said something horrifying, reminding you to be careful. For a while no one spoke and one after another looked at that guy as if from the Misty Mountain near Tsai country. LV Yundai, the lord of the Misty Mountain, really couldn't help but talk about it anymore. His mother did not step on shit but stepped in a cesspit. It's okay for you to help Xinjiang Mountain to speak up. The problem is that Lao Tzu has an enmity with that young sword immortal. What's more, the Misty Mountain of Lao Tzu back then suffered a sword challenge earlier than Jingyang Mountain. Moreover, Lu Yundai also noticed a glimmer of sight that he rushed to him. The reason why he had kept it before was because he felt that he was hidden and inconspicuous. He bit the dog with Xingyang Mountain Dog and beat him to death. The more casualties on both sides became it is good. The result is all right. These idiots who had their brains flooded and kicked the donkey insisted on slandering they let themselves be watched. As expected, what they were afraid of, a voice of heart sounded in Lu Yundai's heart lake. Hide what? If you remember correctly, you and my husband are old friends? My husband took the initiative to visit your Misty Mountain Patriarch Hall? Lu Yundai's face was pale and colorless. After holding back for a long time, he trembled. It is the honor of Misty Mountain to be able to be asked by Qin Shanzhu personally. I am flattered and flattered. In fact, Cui Dongshan, who is far above Biefeng, smiled and said, for the sake of your ability to talk, I will spare you half your life. As for the younger brothers and sisters next to you, as long as they speak justice. You help me write it down and then you follow the words of those guys and continue to chat. Your litter of piglets are fattened up for the New Year's killing. The speech is not big or small and the behavior is not light. It's heavy, it's right to be a man. I crane my neck and scream, but I want past the new year. In a mountain temple in the country of Susui, Wei Wei took two goddesses, looking at Jinghua Shuiyu, staring intently, laughing and applauding. When the Emperor Bamboo removed Jinghua Shuiyu, he began to curse again. In the beautiful scenery, Song Yushao and his grandson and daughter-in-law looked at Jinghua Shuiyu together. The old man was eating the hot pot, but he said softly with a smile, "Stinky boy, good luck, not bad." Xianyu County is near the top of a Xianxia mountain. An elderly martial artist who has reached the age of martial arts can be regarded as a beautiful scene with that school. He clenched his fists and put his knees gently. The gray-haired old man, his waist straight, seemed to forget to drink. In the Changchun Palace, the Queen Mother Dolly looked gloomy. The remaining two continents, Dukui Jianhu Li Kai, brought Rong Chong, Sui Jingqing, Qin Li and Gao Yuqing, the direct descendants of the family, watching with gusto. The great sword Immortal Baishang in the north did not leave the journey to Aquarius Island. He said with a smile that today this mountain must feel aggrieved. Maybe in 100 or 200 years he will feel proud. A young man who had just become a prince of the Dayuan dynasty, lying on the table staring at the beautiful landscape painting, he said, "My master is invincible not only with boxing skills, but also swordsmanship." Tianjun Xiesher muttered to himself. It seemed that he was waiting to be asked about the sword again. King Liangzong, the woman's sect master, put her cheek in one hand, only looking at one person in the picture scroll. There is also the Daquan dynasty. And Luopa Mountain, Chao Sunin, Yuan Shu, Tsin Yuan Ji, Yuan Bao, Yuan Lai, etc., all gathered together. Even in many other continents, including Zhongtu Shenzhou, many mountain sects are using all kinds of immortal means to appreciate this celebration and inquiring sword of Xia's Henjiang Mountain. On the other side of Xiaogu Mountain, there is only one Su Jia, a peerless beauty, living in an empty valley with long twigs standing alone, scattered with vegetation. Yu asked tentatively, "That Miyu from the Great Wall of Sword Chi?" Miyu wondered, "Are you?" This Howren Jianxiu, who openly claimed to have his pseudonym Yu upside down, was it because his surname was Yu he came to climb relatives with his Yumi? Yu laughed and said, "I am a good buddy of Puha from Luxiazu. He admires Mi Jianxian very much." When he returned to his hometown, he mentioned Mi Jianxian on the wine table and praised him. Especially Mi Jianxian's sword skills on the battlefield are highly respected and admired. One bite, one rice, sword fairy? Miyu endured and endured, seeing that the other party was his family, sullen his face, kept smiling and nodded. It's easy to say. Yu probably thought it was the right way to chat like this and continued to smile heartily. Mi Jianxian, my real name is Yu. From now on we will be a family. Of course, Mi Jianxian is the second consecration and I am the general consecration. It's incomparable. Miyu didn't bother to talk nonsense, just nodded. Seeing that he had no chance to hand over his sword for the time being, Yu continued to chat, having nothing to look for. Looking at the sword spirit of Mi Jianxian, breaking the realm into an immortal is just around the corner. It's not over, right? Oh Yu, I called yourself a sword repairman in the Yupu realm before, and then when you came to Laozi it was Mi Jianxian? Still broken? So Miyu couldn't help cursing. Fuck your mother's sword fairy and sword fairy. Your whole family is a sword fairy, Lao Tzu is a tattered jade, go cool. Yu Yu was embarrassed and Lao Tzu finally suffocated a few good words. Why did you still curse? It's just that he wasn't angry, and pooh, he had scolded no matter how bad it was, not to mention that he had never been to the Great Wall of Jianqi after all. On Qinggu Peak, Pei Qian squinted her eyes. There were some words on the mountain and her voice was louder. When she was deaf. Cui Dongshan was chatting with Chief Shou. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, "It seems that the site selection of the next clan in Tongyi's Hao will not only be much earlier, it will also go smoothly. With such a disturbance today, who would dare to stop 3 and 4 in Tongyezhou?" When I asked Jianjingyang Mountain this time, Jiang Shangzhen didn't contribute anything, but he casually raised a mouth to Chen Pingon earlier, saying that Wei Ying the kid is very optimistic about Jian Xiu Yuanbai, who came from the Zhuang dynasty. As the chief worshipper of the Luopa Mountain, Jiang Shangzhen actually didn't mind being able to help. For example, let Lu Laoqing and Lu Zhimao choose a mountain for no reason and fight against each other. As for Zhenjingzong and you, how did Guizong end up in the end? It was Wei Ying's business. You should go to Sect Master Jiang. Anyway, it has nothing to do with Shou Fei. As for Li Fuyu, forget it, she is the honorable guest of the Luopa Mountain and Jiang Shang really cares about it, just her? It's enough to be a registered outside handyman. In fact, they were called here temporarily. This shows that the mountain master felt that it was necessary to speed up the selection of the site for the next clan, rather than the step-by-step as previously expected interlocking. It seems that the young mountain owner changed a lot of thoughts during his visit to the Chinese-Turkish Confucian temple and a trip to Luzhou in Beiju. Cui Dongshan twisted his 2 white sleeves vigorously and said with a smile, "That is to say, I am kind and careful. Otherwise, if I walk Sister Tian out for a while, Sovereign Bamboo will be able to dig out a pair of eyes and throw it away." After a few feet on the ground, I felt that I was blind as justified. Jiang Shangzhen nodded and said, "You must be kind and very particular. After all, the style of our Laupa mountain is right there." Jiang Shangzhen suddenly said, "Brother Cui, we can now consider things 100 years from now. For example, if we pass on the disciple's personal biography and pass on again, they will go down the mountain in the future. Will it be accidental? Yangshan Jianxiu does not exist on the mountain and must not be under the mountain?" Seeing that Cui Dongshan did not speak but his expression was serious, Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, "What do you think? This kind of problem won't make you so embarrassed, right?" Cui Dongshan said, "I'm thinking in the future when we order other sects of Shanshui Mansion newspaper, whether we will be diligent and thrifty, and we will only buy 1 copy on the mountain, or whether everyone is rich and wealthy, each one will buy one for each." Jiang Shangzhen wanted to laugh at first, but the more he thought about it, the more he couldn't laugh. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "How? Is it true that finding such a small matter is the real problem?" Jiang Shangzhen curiously asked, "Is there an answer?" "Have. What's the solution? Look what Mr. means." Jiang Shangzhen really laughed out loud this time and gave a thumbs up to the white-clothed boy in the distance, so he was a proud disciple. Jiang Shangzhen learned from that young mountain lord with his hands in sleeves. I don't know if he can do something today, otherwise how can he sit firmly in the top seat of worship? Ordinary people, night wanderers with candles, precarious wind and rain, muddy roads, what you need most is not straw shoes but an umbrella. Cui Dongshan turned his head and found the little girl with sweat oozing from her forehead. She looked serious and unknowingly frowning with 2 pale yellow eyebrows. Cui Dongshan's eyes were gentle and he smiled, "Xiaomili, what's wrong, homesick?" The little girl in black laughed, pulled the sleeve of the big white goose and squeezed the walking stick in her hand. The millet grains were stern, trying to make herself look higher than the dongfu, but quietly said to Cui Dongshan, "Little brother, I'm a little nervous." Cui Dongshan hurriedly put Chief Shou aside and smiled with Xiaomili. "What are you nervous about? There is a little brother and a big sister. Besides, you don't need to fight, let's the right guardian of Luopashan deal with this. Help the young man, isn't the overkill? In a moment you will take the trekking stick and be responsible for dispatching troops, where to fight, not to say anything else. Anyway, he'll just listen to your platoons with Chief Shou. Lay out." Millet scratched his face, "But I haven't read the military book." Cui Dongshan stretched out his hand and rubbed the head of the millet grain, but she raised his hand and moved it away. Cui Dongshan put it on her head again and was slapped off by her. When he reached out again, the millet grain turned his head and stared. "Why? Well, be careful of you." Cui Dongshan smiled and put his hands away. The woman from the Su family in Qingfeng City who was left in the mountains, looked up and stared at the lord of the fox country. The woman gritted her teeth, hated her and said something in her heart, Peixiang, a bitch, you still have it today. Show your face. What? Did you hook up with the shopkeeper Yanfang or sneak up on the big bed with mud legs? Who seduced whom? Ning Yao, who was far away from Bailudu, raised his eyebrows because he noticed the woman's voice. Except for the mountain-moving ape on the top of the first-line peak, Ning Yao actually didn't care much about it. On the contrary, he was on the side of Luopa Mountain, Jianxiu Sui on the right, the fox country, the fox charm Peixiang, and Ning Yao all have an understatement. Swept away. Then he noticed Zu's wife again. So Ning Yao really acted according to his liking. The Su family's wife had just boarded the ship with Su Hun, and the ferry had just left Feng Tu. In an instant, a Xianxia ferry seemed to be broken into thousands of pieces. There is no sword light, sword energy or sword intent. And everyone on the ferry didn't notice any chi ripples, the slightest strange. Ning Yao only said something to the woman's heart. Shut up, don't seek death. After that, Ning Yao had to find signs that Qin Pingan was about to make a sword earlier than the Fengxue Temple of Wei and Jin dynasties. Then she held back her laugh. Move the mountain in front of an ancestor who moved the mountain? This kind of thing is what he wants and can do. At the foot of the mountain he wore a blue shirt. After waiting for half a time he raised Jingyang Shanzu mountain several meters high with a sword, and then the sword formation fell on the top of the sword, smashing the Patriarch Hall. After the earth-shattering vision, the dust on the top of the mountain was flying, and then gradually drifting away, regaining clarity. The first-line peak is silent. The old and new peaks of Xingyang Mountain can be heard wherever there are monks. After Qin Pingan received the sword and returned it to its sheath, he smiled and said, "It only counts as half of the sword, you still have half of the incense stick, you can continue to discuss matters." Tao Yanbo, who had never nodded or shook his head, trembled. Tao Zi, a female sword repairer, did not stay in Tingjian Pavilion, but went to the top of the sword. She wanted to do her best to cheer for Grandpa Yuan. The old ape in white, with arms around his chest, glanced at the woman who looked at the grown-up, from a little girl who was carved into a slim girl, and then into a beautiful woman about to get married. When the mountain guardian saw the familiar look in her eyes, Yuan Xinye finally began to feel a little distressed. A look of guilt flashed across Tao Zi's face and she quickly turned her head as if she did not dare to face the old white ape. But she turned her head quickly, her face was innocent and her eyes seemed clear and firm. The white-clothed old ape was a little dazed, glanced at the ruins of the Patriarch's Hall, and finally glanced at the grown-up Qiu Lingshan woman. Is this Xingyang Mountain? At the foot of the mountain, everyone saw the sword fairy in green shirt, who actually took off the long sword from his back, threw it away and inserted the scabbard into the archway building. Qin Pingan rolled up his sleeves and after holding one hand he handed his palm to the top of the mountain with the other. Old beast, come take advantage of the enshrinement of Xingyang Mountain, try going down the mountain and kill me. These words are arrogant enough. I didn't think about the next sentence, which was even more stunned. A blue shirt outside the mountain gate, full of spirits, eyebrows flying like a young boy crossing the river. Within half a stick of incense I will not fight back. Sword of Coming Chapter 824. The suspended sword formation fell to the ground, smashing the Patriarch Hall. The sword gas ripples everywhere, the whole line of peaks. The wind was surging, especially the towering ancient tree on the side of the sword pavilion, was excited by the sword gas. The leaves fell one after another, drifting around leisurely when they landed. A large group of Xingyang Mountain's direct disciples seemed to have entered an eventful autumn in advance, and their eyes were full of worry. This time, no one thought that the young sword immortal of the Lost Mountain was talking about a crazy dream. Behind the Tingjian Pavilion, there is a Polonia tree planted by the founder of Xingyang Mountain. It has grown unharmed for more than 2,000 years and it grows into the clouds. Therefore there are many fallen leaves today. On the top of the sword, the Sovereign Lord Bamboo and the Immortal Sword Formation only protected the Divine Master Tablet, the incense burner, the hanging statues of the ancestors and masters in the Patriarch Hall, and everything else, carefully crafted seats that have been passed down from generation to generation. Each root is worthless. The immortal wood beams and the floor tiles with more refined craftsmanship than the Imperial Palace, seem to have become misty and scattered with the dust. Only Zhuyu Mineta and Wu Tijing, the close disciple of suzerain Zhu Huang, were the only people in this out-of-door discussion that violated ancestral rules and regulations. The two of them were not present. In addition, even Yujiafeng Yulin had already arrived with the imperial sword. After proposing to remove Yuan Xinye from his name, he immediately followed the sentence, I, Emperor Bamboo, as the 8th Mountain Lord of Xinjiang Mountain, the first suzerain behind the sect, and the triple identity of the sword repairman in the Yupu realm, agreed to this matter. After that, you only need to nod and shake your head, and no one needs words for today's discussion. After that, Full Moon Peak Xia Yuntue took the lead in seconding the agreement. Zhang Li Yanchu hesitated for a long time, and ignored Qiu Lingshan Tao Yanba's persuasion. He nodded in agreement with the mountains close to Full Moon Peak and Shuilong Peak and several sword veins such as Qiong. Jifeng Lingqi has no choice but to follow these high-powered ancestors to draw a clear line with the white-clothed old ape. The dozens of worshippers and Kiching of Xinjiang Mountain nodded after Zhu Huang, Xia Yuntue, and Yanchu all expressed their opinions. Today they gave up a page of Yuan Xinye. It is better for them to go off the court in person and fight against that Luapa mountain. And the avenue who will be compensated. Just to say that the previous hanging sword formation that was manifested by a golden light on the avenue was really too energetic. Only the reflection of the sword light falling on the mountain made them look like a glow. Everyone weighed it separately. Being cut into the skin of the body by those swords, it will only be like a knife-cut tofu. If the Emperor Bamboo didn't mean it and they were willing to gather people's hearts earlier, they actually didn't mind the icing on the cake, the responsibilities of enshrinement and the responsibilities of the guest, and helped the frontline peaks offer a few celestial skills of housekeeping skills. But since the Emperor Bamboo has such an attitude, no one is so stunned and will not be arrogant, fighting for his own life and future prospects, and going to help Xinjiang Mountain in the snow. On the contrary, it was the old peaks including Yunfeng and Pianjifeng. These peak master Xianxian all shook their heads and rejected the suggestion of the sovereign Zhu Huang. One of them, the old Jin Dan, directly cursed the suzerain Emperor Zhu Huang for this act, which is a self-defeating family business, ignorant of conscience and no morality at all. It will only make the ancestors of Xinjiang Mountain shame for this and be humiliated by outsiders. Instead of taking the lead to retreat with the sword, you would rather be led by the nose and abandon a hard-working mountain protector. You Bamboo Emperor is not worthy of a sword repairer. How can you be the mountain lord? What needs to be discussed is not whether Yuan Zini's genealogical name should be erased, but whether your Emperor Bamboo can continue to be the sovereign. The Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, as I said earlier, you can just nod and shake your head without speaking. As a result, Lao Jin Dan was directly detained by the sword formation Immortal, stretched out his hand to grab it and put it in his sleeve. Lu Xianyang moved his hips, changed a table and continued to drink and eat melons. A female patriarch turned her head to look at Lu Xianyang glaringly at each other and said, Lu Xianyang, you and Qin Pingon ask the sword when you ask about the sword, why bother so much, behave insidiously, hide behind the scenes, call your friends and try your best. We at Xinjiang Mountain are really capable, so we learned from Fengliu and Yellow River and hit the top of the sword from Bailudu all the way to the top of the sword. This is what the sword fairy can do. Instead of tit for tat, Lu Xianyang pecked at the rice and nodded vigorously. Yes, this old aunt, you are old and you are right. If there is a chance next time, I will definitely pull Qin Pingon. Xian like that. In quarreling things like this, there are dragons and crouching tigers in my hometown. Masters are like clouds, the younger generation except for the rich children in Fulu Street and Taoya Lane such as Zhao Yu and Xieling, they may be a little bit inferior and the others are not since childhood. Just ears and eyes, all the alleys next to the Longjing well under the old locust trees between the ridges of the Longyao fields, and the wall between the door and the door, where is not the martial arts field for sharpening your mouth. The female patriarch who wore a golden silk crown and emerald green robe, was really trembling with anger by Lu Xianyang's generous words. The white-clothed old ape took a step forward and said with a calm expression, there is still half a stick of incense, you continue to talk. I will go to see the muddy legs that are so ambitious for a while. Lu Xianyang raised the wine glass with one hand and thumbs up with the other. Lao Zuyuan is invincible. He once changed his fist and Song Chongjing kicked Piyun Mountain, and smashed countless ancestral homes of each family. The Chao family's ancestral home in Mud Bottle Lane, Erlang Lane, the Yuan family, the Li family in the far west, and the Xie family in Taoya Lane, are all invincible. Who would dare to settle accounts with the ancestor who moved to the mountain Chioho? Now that they have broken the border, dealing with Qin Pingon is not easy. The ancestors of the peaks of Xingyang Mountain as well as a group of worshippers are all horrified. How many powers did this guardian enshrined when he traveled to the sky of Lizhu Cave? It is no wonder that Chao Jun, who claims to be from Ni Ping Alley, will ask Jian Qiang Zifeng and Bei Jianfeng one after another. And that Dali patrolling envoy Chao Ping? The two ancestors of Yuan and Chao came from the sky of Lizhu Cave. They complemented each other by helping the Song family of Dali rise in the north and gain a firm foothold so as not to be annexed by the Liu dynasty. In the end, they have the awe-inspiring vision of today's Dali Iron Cavalry. This is a fact known to all continents. Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, "Lu Jianxian, stop joking." These few words of Lu Xianying are of course nonsense, but at this moment who is not suspicious, and a few words are tantamount to adding fuel to the fire and making things worse. Xingyang Mountain cannot withstand such a toss. Behind the guardian mountain enshrining Yuan Zhinya, an old ape figure appeared, stomping heavily, setting foot between the top of the sword and the Dingjian pavilion, and at the same time running the magical powers of moving the mountain together, stepping down the first line of peaks and crashing to the ground. The surrounding mountains, waters and air luck will then be firmly integrated. The little humble species in Ni Ping Alley dared to cut open the Zhu Mountain, and then raised a line of peaks with a sword, causing the Zhu Mountain to be several feet high from the ground. This magical power of stepping on the mountains to take root, shaking so much that it can be called domineering, making many Kiching worship capitals feel worried, will they fall to one side with the Bamboo Emperor, and if they are not careful they will make the wrong bet? When the time comes, no matter how the Emperor Bamboo mediates to remedy it, at least they will have to fight against Yuan Zhinya. The white-clothed old ape put away his face behind his back, his breath flowing like a river, his big sleeve drum was hunting, and he grinned and said, "Zhuzi is famous, he will die with his fist." Yuan Zhinya stood up from the ground, leaped high, and the mountain trembled at his feet. His burly figure turned into a white rainbow, turning at high altitude straight ahead and hit the mountain gate. Lu Xianying stood up, helped his nose, carrying a pot of wine, came to Jianding Cliff, squatted on a white jade railing, drinking and watching the battle. A thick and unmatched boxing gang like a fairy sword flying sword, making the sky and the earth shine, and the place where the blue shirt stood outside the mountain gate, has punched a lake-like depression. At the Tingjian Pavilion, the disciples of Xingyang Mountain's descendant peaks were eagerly looking forward. After seeing the fist of Yuan Laozu, all of them were dazzled and shaken. Young sword repairers clenched their fists and cheered silently. Many guests watching the ceremony saw Yuan Zini's shot for the first time. It is indeed a well-deserved name for a mountain guardian. Yuan Zini's fist is so powerful that it can clearly kill the Yuanying monk. Maybe those tough-looking far-flung martial arts fighters would have to split their corpses on the spot after receiving this punch. But on the waterless lake outside the mountain gate, a blue shirt remained motionless, suspended in the air with a smile on his face. After holding one hand, he gently waved the other to disperse the surrounding dust. The white-clothed old ape landed at the gate of the mountain, turned his head and glanced at the long sword inserted in the plaque of the archway. After retracting his gaze, he stared at the sword fairy in Qingshan who had walked step by luck to today and asked, "Do you need to keep your corpse? Otherwise you can't stop the like Luopashan and it will be difficult to collect the corpse afterwards." Qin Pingon didn't have any words, but he hooked his fingers at the old ape in white clothes enough, then turned his head slightly, put his fingers together, tapped his neck and signaled Yuan Zhinya to hit here. Yuan Zini's eyes squinted, his feet slammed, and the earth was dull and swaying. The roots of the mountain peaks in the depths of the first line had a shaking aftertaste, causing the surrounding heaven and earth to ripple and shake. If the confrontation between the two sides is a landscape painting, then all show their palms. Visitors on the mountain watching the mountains and rivers at this moment will find that the scrolls of the mountains and rivers here are shaking for a while. The white-clothed old ape's figure disappeared in a flash, and the next moment, a blue shirt was swept fiercely with a punch, hit the neck and instantly moved out dozens of feet. Qin Pingon shook his wrist slightly, his figure stopped instantly, shook his neck, his eyes were full of smiles as if he was saying that you should try it. "Don't keep your hands away, what are you polite to me?" Even if the sword repairer is uniquely endowed while he can temper the flying sword, he will in turn warm his soul, and he will not miss the sword and temper the body and get twice the result with half the effort. This makes the sword repair headed by the 4 most difficult ghosts on the mountain can break 10,000 with one sword. Fei and has a body comparable to military monks in pure martial arts. But even the Xianxia sword fairy from the Luopa mountain and his friend Lu Xianying are already in the Jade Ungarden realm. But a Jade Ungarden sword fairy can really create a small world. As a city so indestructible? Until this moment, those monks who knew the identity of Zhou Xian were a little convinced that she might really be the great disciple of this young mountain master. And the white-clothed old ape Wei is really the wind of the mountain master. Every time he punches he does not take advantage of the victory, and stops after passing the punch as if deliberately giving the green shirt guest a relaxing and breathing space. This enshrined spirit-bearing guardian of the upper 5 realms. Although he is an undoubted monk, he has always used his fist and kung fu to move Aquarius. The old ape in white has a gloomy face. Do you really want to fight back? The blue shirt, who had never carried the sword at the moment, remained silent. Yuan Jingye sneered, opened a simple boxing frame, bent his knees slightly and bowed his head slightly as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. Together with the boxing frame, there was a vision of swallowing heaven and earth aura, the natural conflicting aura and pure true aura. I got along harmoniously and all turned into a strong fist. Not only that, after the fist was opened, the fist behind him turned into a mountain like a monk in the mountains, and the fist at his feet was like a river flowing raging, and that Dao Men's step fighting gang has the same effect, laying out a pattern of immortal family full of spirit. And finally the white-clothed old ape steps on a brand new true-shape picture of the 5 sacred mountains on Aquarius Island. Before handing his fist, the white-clothed old ape, as the ancient immortals raised the giant mountain and stepped on the river. Refining and moving mountains are supernatural powers, and casting fist means mountains and rivers. Qin Pingon glanced at the half-dangling true picture. It seems that this mountain guardian enshrines, in fact he hasn't been idle for these years, but he has figured out some new tricks. There was a visitor in the mountain in Qinggu Peak who was amazed. This style of boxing can be described as reaching the peak beyond the power of Mrs. Wu. Pei Qian squinted at the person, almost couldn't hold back, like dealing with the left guard of Qilong Lane holding down the other's dog's head, let him stare at the dog's eyes to take a good look, waiting for her master to make a move. What is the real boxing technique? Everyone saw the burly old ape with the momentum to open up the world, and slammed the young sword fairy in the head. The white-clothed old ape stood in the original position of the blue shirt in an instant. But the young mountain master still didn't fight back, hitting his forehead with that punch. Is the old ape already destined to avoid it with this fist? From the first line peak on the lake, to the verdant full moon peak, a long blue line stretched out in an instant. Almost everyone looked at the full moon peak subconsciously, wearing a blue shirt standing in the air, but behind this person the entire foot of the full moon peak, the wind blowing, swept the mountain peak. Countless Xianxia trees all broke. Some were killed by the pond fish. The Xianxia mansion of Xianxia, like paper, was shredded by that fist. Just talk about the slipping route of the sword Immortal Qingshan. Just above the ground between the 2 peaks, a gully that was several feet deep was cut. The white-clothed old ape followed like a shadow, and another punch, the fist beam bloomed brightly, the white light was dazzling, and it was as big as the mouth of a well, and it hit straight. With one punch, the green shirt that was originally backed by the green mountain was completely punched through the entire moon peak. Yuan Jingye followed the chaste mountain road, slightly propped up a strong domineering fist, and countless rocks on the road collapsed, and finally stepped on more cliffs, making full moon peak a back mountain list. The book cliff was carved and destroyed, and the burly figure turned into a rainbow. He took a punch and punched the little who really made up his mind not to fight back. The opponent's figure was smashed and fell to Qiuling Mountain, which was halfway up the mountain. That summer lake. The heavy fist in the blue shirt retreated extremely fast, but when it was near the surface of the water, his figure hovered suddenly, and his toes lightly touched the lake surface, splashing a circle of spreading ripples. The green shirt is precarious and the fairy stands in the water. The whole lake under his feet exploded on the spot, boiling water billowed, set off huge waves, and the mist rose. Many monks who watched the battle in the nearby waterside attic suddenly lost countless chickens. Xia Yuanqui's eyelids trembled in this thrilling scene. If you two are both dogged, fight and fight, change places and fight, don't ruin the feng shui treasure of my mountaintop. The old ape in white smashed his head with a fist. I heard that your kid has liked to pray to God and worship Buddha since he was a child. Qin Pingon just stretched out his palm and blocked the punch casually. A sword immortal in a green shirt and an old ape in white. On the way the two sides fell, the summer lake was completely empty. They landed on the shore and rushed in all directions, down the mountain along the full moon peak. The mountain climbing shrine on Full Moon Peak is like a stream with steps as a river bed, clacking towards the foot of the mountain. The descendants of this peak near the Xiaoxiu Lake, and the monks who watched the ceremony were in a hurry. They had to rely on their own means to resist the overwhelming waves that hit the shore and lifted into the sky. The most troublesome part is that it contains the sense of fist and covers the sky with the lake. The sun was unstoppable, so that many monks' spells were shattered, and their natal creatures were beaten up like duckweeds, and the Daoist heart was unstable, and they quickly put them away as soon as they were sacrificed. The immortal fights, the vulgar child suffers. Below the top of the mountain, all the air trainers who are not earth immortals are different from the ordinary masters in the market below the mountain. Everyone was horrified. The old ancestor who moved to the mountain had 1,000 years of time just serving as the enshrinement of Xingyang Mountain. Then the years of living in the mountain and cultivating the Taoism will only be longer. With this method, if it is still a bit more, the truth can be said, but the young sword fairy who was born in the sky, who was about the same age as Lu Xianying, was born to death. Where did this cultivation background come from? The 10 young and alternate candidates selected by Aquarius Island, Shenwu Mountain, Ma Kexuan's cultivation roots and talents, Jiang Yun and Lu Baqiu's teachings, Xia Ling's family background and blessings, no matter how they rise, there will be traces to follow. The Xiaoxiu Lake is not only empty, but even the muddy bottom of the lake is scattered, and the roots of the Full Moon Peak underwater are exposed. Came to light, but so. This kind of scene was created, but the white monkey handed his fist. Qingshan received his fist and just took a punch. Qin Pingon stood on the blue stone that was slightly moisturized, and the blue stone kept cracking under his feet, and the bottom of the summer lake was like a cobweb. Qin Pingon raised his hand and used the water method to re-enter the lake. The old ape in white stood on the shore, his face as usual. After counting the punches, a mouthful of pure innocence, the qi went through the mountains and rivers, still not exhausted. Xianxia said with his heartfelt words to several nephews and nephews around him, "Senior nephew Tao, my Full Moon Peak is nothing but some broken stones, but your chilling mountain is a good summer lake. It is difficult to repair because of this storm." Yanchu said, "Yamba, half of the incense stick is half past. Have you still not made a decision?" "Actually, I want to say, anyway, the overall situation is set. Qiu Lingshan can't change anything no matter if he nods and shakes his head. The implication of the ancestor of the Master of Control is naturally kind, reminding this of wealth of the same generation to retain a heroic spirit for Qiu Lingshan, and to spread it out better, cross the river to tear down the bridge. It is the Bamboo Emperor and the First Line Peak. The meaning of Qiu Lingshan is not the same. The strength of the wind is dignified, and there is a chance that all outsiders who stay in the peaks to observe the ceremony will be admired. For Yanchu Tao Yamba's Qiu Lingshan, it is best to smash the face to fill the fat man to the end, and take care of all the money in Xingyang Mountain. In fact, he is more powerful than the Master of Law who was born in Shuilong Peak. If Shuilong Peak and Chilling Mountain, can they switch positions from now on?" The Emperor Bamboo looked displeased and said solemnly, "This is the end of the matter, so don't make separate calculations." The so-called one stick of incense asked the sword before. That Qin Pingon was nonsense, but the approximate time limit for the sword top immortal beside Emperor Bamboo to maintain his current realm. Could this guy be a roundworm in the belly of Xingyang Mountain? Why is everything clear? Therefore, in the depths of the Bamboo Emperor's heart, the real fear is not the sword immortal or the mountain master, but the thought of hiding needles everywhere. After being thrown into the lake by Qin Pingon, the water level was shallow and clear. Qin Pingon finally spoke and smiled and asked, "It was excusable when I was in a small town back then. How can I still be such a lady chirping on my own site? Afraid of killing me? Because Yuan Jinya is still a gas trainer after all, so in the past years the higher the level the more suppression and the greater the pressure, and every breath and spit will involve a small cave. If you are not careful, Yuan Jinya will spend a lot of time and eventually delay the breakthrough. With Yuan Zini's status, he naturally knows the long-lived 10,000-year-old Jiao Jiao in Huang Tingua, even the dragon genus descent who devotes himself to cultivating Taoism in Fengshui Cave of Qiantang River in the southeast boundary has the same chance to become the first in Aquarius. The mountains and mountains are strange in Yupu realm. It is estimated that this mountain guard was enshrined at that time. At that time, the upper 5 realms were considered to be in the bag, and he made up his mind to fight for the first, in order to gather the Ijo Dedeo fortune. So at most it was at the Kiln Affairs Supervision and Administration Department over there. I met the feudal Lord Song Chongjing in the white dragonfish suit. His hands were itchy for a while and he couldn't help but change his fists, thinking about using his fists and feet to help strengthen his own way so that he could go further. Yuan Jingye grinned and said, I have seen someone who is asking for death. I have never seen you begging for death like this. Grandpa Yuan will satisfy you today. The face of the old man in the white-clothed old ape showed a somewhat ape-like real body, and the head and face instantly became hairy like countless silver threads flying. The old ape swept the ribs in the blue shirt with one leg, kicked it out of Qiuling Mountain, and flew horizontally to a nearby Cheongji Peak. Under one foot the Qi machine is chaotic like a big thunder and shattered in a projectile, and the whole autumn mountain spread out in bursts, like a row of iron riding across the border. Wherever it passed the rocks collapsed, the vegetation was dusty and the mansion exploded. Even the clouds and mist outside the Qiuling Mountain were tilted, as if being pulled towards Cheongji Peak. From beginning to end the sword fairy in Qingshan, who kept his promise never to fight back, stepped on the ridge of a fairy mansion, the head of an ancient tree branch and the top of a green bamboo with his toes, and then stopped. The second seat of Luopa Shenmi, who is responsible for guarding Cheongji Peak, hastily put away the sky and the sky. The white-clothed old ape crashed into the bamboo forest, causing countless emerald green colors in Qiangzifeng Mountain to bloom in an instant, and hundreds of thousands of green bamboo poles broke out of the ground and flew randomly. It's just that Yuan Jingye punched extremely fast this time and few people could see clearly. More people can only vaguely see the white rainbow figure in the middle of the verdant green, unstoppable, tearing the world with fists. As for the green shirt, there is no trace. In the next moment, a cyan-painted arc swept over Cheongji Peak. The extremely long arc just passed a Piaoyin Peak and then past a vassal hill. The white-clothed old ape shrank in the mountains and rivers, suddenly showing his true body and huge palms. Sweeping out, directly interrupting the entire blue mountain top, Shan Ruofei sword, slammed into the blue shirt. The latter waved his sleeves casually, the mountain top broke and smashed in the air on the spot, and the rock-flying sword fell like rain. The cyan figure took advantage of the momentum and flew to the Yujiao Peak 10 miles away at a faster speed. The old ape Faxiang followed in large strides, leaning on the Yujiao Peak with one shoulder, hitting the top of the Yifeng Peak and breaking apart again, spurring Qin Pingon. At the same time, old ape Faxiang slammed his foot into the ground, sank deeply into the ground, gave a soft drink and then slammed a small hill on the ground off the roots, and lifted it into the air one after the other with Yujiao Peak. Smashed at that Qingshan sword fairy. The ferocious outburst of the old mountain-moving ape uprooted two tributary mountain peaks, clenched one in one hand and smashed at the little bunny. The majestic face of the old ape stepped across the mountains and rivers, stepped on the top of a broken mountain in a small southern country in the past and looked ahead. Qin Pingans joined together to make a sword cut, split the Yujifeng mountain in the center, waved his sleeve with his left hand, and smashed the mountain back intact, and then tapped twice with both fingers to directly smash the two tribal hills. Set in the air. A green shirt floated slowly on the top of Qinggu Peak. Pei Qian hurriedly landed and stood beside the master, otherwise it would be outrageous. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's okay. The old beast didn't have enough food today." He fisted softly. He stretched a little away and left the mountain indiscriminately. The catkins were shaken. It was far less powerful than our millet grains and melon seeds. The little girl in black smiled from ear to ear, holding the hiking stick in her arms, and quickly raised her hands to block her mouth. Her faint eyebrows and squinted eyes made the table happy. How can she be so powerful, so good? What a good person. Mountain Master is talking nonsense. Don't believe any of you, but if you really want to believe it, I will let you not believe it. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, "The right guardian does not need to shoot today. It is already famous." Xiaomi Lian laughed and said, "Void names are false names." Qin Pingon said to Pei Qian again in his heartfelt voice, staring at the Yixin Peak, "Whoever dares to appear, you will fight back." Pei Qian nodded, "I see." Qin Pingon stepped on the ground lightly, and his figure instantly left Qinggu Peak silently. Compared to the veritable pull-up of the white-clothed old ape, he was indeed without momentum at all. Wearing a blue shirt, he passed the two hills that seemed to have been subjected to the fixation technique, dragged the mountains and faced the old ape who stepped on the mountains far away. The remaining half-stick incense is about to end. Qin Pingon laughed with a heartfelt smile. Don't worry, at least Taozi will definitely take action on the Yixian peak. I remember the first time I saw it on Fulu Street. I knew she was a smart person since she was a child. But Yuan, if you go through the mountains and rivers with such an invincible posture, how can she fight for you? 3 punches, and the last 3 punches Yuan Laozu carefully weighed, whether to continue to let the layman watch the excitement, or let the expert watch the doorway. I am free. After speaking, he dragged the 2 mountains and threw them to 2 places respectively, serving as the tip of the mountain tops of Yunfeng Domain and Yujiao Peak. The white-clothed old ape suddenly put away his facial features. Standing on the top of the mountain, the old ape took a deep breath. Just such an unusual spit. There is a strong mountain breeze rising between the peaks, the wind blowing, the wind rolling clouds. Yuan Xinye, who broke the cliff and folded the wood, stood on the top of the mountain looking around, thousands of miles of mountains and rivers crawling under his feet. In the field of vision, only the green shirt was the only one that was an eye-catcher. As said by Ni Ping Lane, it is true that he could pass 3 punches. Yuan Xinye's body is a blend of Taoism, fist and mind, as if he has practiced Taoism for thousands of years as the sky, and accumulated and polished the fist and mind for thousands of years. He takes the small world of the human body as a longevity bridge, combining 2 into 1, and finally reaching the mysterious state of heaven and earth. At the highest point of his life, the first punch he handed in exchange for his injury was equivalent to a punch at the pinnacle of the end of the martial arts. The little muddy legs should be fumbled in the mud all their lives. Fortunately, I don't know how to cherish it. I don't know how to hide and enjoy the blessing. If I dare to come to Xingyang Mountain, I will blow you to pieces and you will fall into the world. You will only be exposed to the bones of Li Tuanjing. The female cultivator of Full Moon Peak in Fenglei Garden Square ended up even worse. If there is an accident, there will be a second punch for the guests, which is equivalent to the full blow of the Fairyland sword repair. The last punch, what sword fairy, what mountain master, go to death. On the Yixian peak, Tao Yanba's face was exhausted. The sword immortals of all peaks, plus the enshrined guest, totaling nearly 100 people, only a handful of Zhengyangshan Jianxiu shaking his head. Besides, they all nodded, agreeing to the proposal of Emperor Bamboo. According to the rules of the Zhuxiatang, from this moment on, Yuan Xinye no longer serves as the protector of Xingyang Mountain. The Emperor Bamboo said, Yuan Xinye, stop it. Although you are no longer the genealogical master of Xingyang Mountain, I am willing to intercede with Luopa Mountain. No matter what the price we Xingyang Mountain pays, we can guarantee that you will be alive today. Go out of the Xingyang Mountain boundary and then please leave Aquarius Island. At the same time, the Emperor Bamboo said with the Qingshan Sword Fairy, Lord Qingshan, as long as Yuan Xinye goes to sea in the future and tries to travel far to other continents, I will personally take Xia Yunsui and Yan Chu cooperate with you, Luopa Mountain, and work together to kill this hunt. Qin Ping did not hear about the placement but only smiled, did not refuse and did not agree. Yuan Xinye was equally indifferent. The white-clothed old ape turned his head and looked at the top of the sword, an old ape face without any expression. It may be that the grief is greater than the death of the heart. It may be the ancestor who moved to the mountain with a continent of luck, but in fact he has a clear mind, still has a backhand and reverses the situation. What the white-clothed old ape saw in his eyes and thought in his heart was that this year's ancient Polonia tree in the mountains had fallen leaves before autumn. In the past years the flowers bloomed and fallen, the leaves were green and yellow, no one was disturbed, only the rustle of the brooms scratching the ground. Yuan Xinye stepped on the top of the whole mountain with one foot, with an aura like a rainbow, and slammed into the green shirt hanging on the heights. A full fist as if higher than the mountain. After a punch was delivered, he shot again like a thunder pond cracked. Almost everyone looked up subconsciously and saw that the green shirt guest was beaten by that punch and disappeared instantly. Yuan Xinye, who was handing his fist, actually slipped out dozens of feet, his sleeves shattered and his 2 muscular arms became bloody with bare bones, and he was shocking. Then the white-clothed old ape suddenly climbed high and became angry. With a shout, he handed a second punch towards the sky. Thousands of miles of mountains and rivers in the sky, only thunder, endless, no green shirt. The thunder blasted as if close to the ears. Many monks with insufficient realm had to cover their ears and tried their best to run the spiritual energy in their bodies to protect Dao Exin. The Earth Immortal monks who stayed in the peaks to observe the ceremony have used magic powers to help the suffering monks around him, and break up the ripples of the Daoist fist. After Xianxia folded his hands, his fists melted, his eardrums were broken, his hair was disheveled, and his temples were covered with white hair, soaked in blood from his ear holes and stuck together. There was a young woman Xianxia on the side of Dingjian Pavilion on the Yixian Peak, and she screamed, "Grandpa Yuan, I'll help you." There was a beautiful woman in purple clothes, who seemed to be out of life and death. She was alone and wanted to go to the sky with a sword. It's just that she was just 10 feet off the ground when she was caught by a young woman with a ball in a bun. Yufeng broke through the air, stretched out her hand to grab her neck, yanked her from the long sword and threw her back. On the square of Dingjian Pavilion, a distressed Tao Zi was about to steer the sword into its sheath, but the woman Wu Fu reached out to hold the sword's edge, twisted it lightly and broke the long sword into two. Nail it into the ground beside Tao Zi. This time the monks learned to be clever, no longer picking up sesame seeds and throwing watermelons, glanced at the movement on the side of the sword pavilion, and continued to look up high with the white-clothed old ape. The man took 2 punches and still didn't fight back. This is not dead. The answer is obvious. Not only did that guy not die, but he was safe and unscathed. At the curtain of the sky, dressed in a green shirt, it seems like walking in a leisurely courtyard, stepping down. The green shirt guest stopped, lifted his shoes, dropped them lightly and then twisted his toes as if he was saying, "Stepping on you Xianxia to death is like crushing an ant to death." Xianxini's eyes widened, only bones clenched in his fists, and he raised his head and roared, "Who are you?" It absolutely does not believe that this green shirt guest who descended from the sky will be the stubborn mud-legged seed that only shook his arms back then. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "The kiln workers of Nipping Lane back then and the current lord of the Luopishan mountain were not all named Qin Pingon, or who else could they be?" Qin Pingon raised his hands, the palms of his hands, condensed and surfaced a round of sun and a month. The day is shining purely and the moon is bright. The sun rises and the moon sets, the sun falls and the moon returns again and again, forming a golden circle with a dignified appearance, just like a trajectory of the avenue of gods traveling around the world. When Qin Pingon twisted his wrist again, it was the natal star of the 5 elements, manifested and born with multicolored colors, just rotating slowly around the sun and the moon. The sun, the moon and the stars, if ordered, surround one person. The sun and the moon hung together, the Milky Way hung in the sky, following the rules, hanging in the sky. After this, there are pictures of mountains and rivers, Aquarius Island, Tongya Island, Beiju Luzhou looming or painted or drawn in white, a crowning landscape god, walking horses and flowers in the picture scroll, and among them there is still an upside-down mountain that has traveled far to the Qingming world. Suddenly, a blue shirt stood in the middle and the gods were in the sky. Rao Jiangshangzhen was a little shaken and couldn't help asking, "Brother Cui, what kind of swordsmanship is this?" Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Of course it is swordsmanship, but it can be considered as a boxing method pioneered by Mr. Wu. You can use both swords and fist. It is a pure martial arts. For thousands of years, the world has flourished. This is the peak." Cui Dongshan waved his snow-white sleeves. "Is it my husband? It's not worth the fuss. Otherwise, how could Mr. Cao get closer to the martial arts? It relies on the 10-level aura of no one before or after. Pei Qian is full of spirits. Look, I'm not smart as expected. Master can teach boxing, but as for feeding boxing, it is absolutely impossible. Under the guise of Shiro's skin, one can't help but repeat his tricks. Raise his arms. The ancestor of the hidden official martial arts is invincible. The swordsmanship is invincible. Go to his mother's by Yujing to be truly invincible." Second year. However, this white-haired boy who possessed Shiro finally remembered to use magic techniques to isolate the world and prevent his words from leaking out. It was inadequate and he always felt that he was not happy enough. After all, the hard-hearted words that the ancestors of the hidden official could not hear. Xiaoyu looked at the bright moon for a while, held his breath and looked at it carefully and finally sighed. Although the guy returned to his hometown at the blacksmith shop, it was probably because of Lu Xianying's face and returned half of the essence of the moon. But this young hidden official has black hearts and hands. What kind of brains are scholars and what they learn is like? Could it be that when I went back to the town I had to go to the school for a few days? Xiaoyu asked, "Will this old ape run away?" Ning Yao shook his head and said, "No, I will die physically and mentally." On the ferry, Yu Huiting only felt thrilled and muttered, "No wonder you can become a hermit in the Great Wall of Jianqi." Wei Jin said, "Yuan Xinye is going to sacrifice his assassin." Yu Huiting asked curiously, "Uncle Wei, what do you say?" Wei Jin was silent. Wouldn't he think about it? Even if you can't think of the truth, you can wait for a while and you will know the answer naturally. What is the point of asking? Yu Huiting mistakenly thought that Master Wei was thinking about things and asked, "Master Wei, is it that the mountain guarding the mountain will be enshrined? The next punch will be more fierce and domineering, thinking about changing lives?" Wei and Jin didn't bother to turn their heads to look at her. Rarely put on the prestige of the elders of the teacher's school, and said indifferently, "I heard that you have a good experience in the mountain and have a good reputation in the Dalibian army. I went back to the Fengxue temple and worked harder on my heart." What he meant was to remind her that she needs to use her brain to practice in the mountains. Yu Huiting didn't think so much, just as Shu Wei, the most unreasonable person in Xianxia, caring for people for an unprecedented time, and she suddenly smiled like a flower. Wei Jin knew that he had said it for nothing. Yuan Zhen's footsteps on the void once again revealed the huge body of the genus that moved the mountain, with a pair of pale golden eyes, staring at the former ant on the heights. There are long rivers of tempered air transport on it, flowing in the veins of the bones and blood that serve as the riverbed. This is the protection of the avenue as the first mountain spirit among the 5 realms in one continent. Qin Pingon also has a pair of golden eyes, but it is far more rich and refined than Yuan Xinye, and sneered, "Why, I have to say that I am Zhu Wei so that you can recognize your ancestors?" Yuan Xinye said sternly. They continued to laugh. After a punch, the jade and the stone were burned. "Remember to reincarnate in the next life and find a good place." Qin Pingon hooked his finger. "Come, please beat me to death. The half-stick of incense has passed, so I can give you another chance to punch." Cui Dongshan endured but still couldn't hold it back and laughed. Jiang Shangzhen was also helpless, looking for someone to compete with the exhaustion of luck and the suppression of the avenue, and don't look for our young mountain master who was targeted by the Howren in the wild. As for the old ancestor who moved to the mountain, there is no need to worry about it, anyway it will shut up completely soon. Jiang Shangzhen asked heartily, "The victory of the 2 worlds is clearly still there. Why doesn't it seem so obvious? Did you find some way to crack it?" Cui Dongshan said, "Mister, I just really wanted to understand a Buddhist saying he wants to cross all beings and it is for all beings. That's why he can take advantage of the trend and enter a certain state. Always get lost in the law and chances are not hindered by the law. Mister has this heart first and then has this state." Jiang Shangzhen nodded and said, "Awesome." However, Jiang Shangzhen knew very well that Cui Dongshan just put it lightly, and Qin Pingon would definitely be a physical and mental suffering when he did it. Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes and said, "Nonsense." At the top of the sword, Lu Xianying shook the empty hip flask in his hand and threw it out of the white jade railing. He hugged the back of his head with both hands and his hatred and grudges were all going on. Outside the Luopa Mountain bamboo house, there is no Jinghua Shuiyu of Xinjiang Mountain, but it does not matter, there is still Chief Shou's method. Chao Qingqing among them held a handful of melon seeds, all of which were left behind before going down the mountain. Sister Nuanshu helped to hand them over. Wei Bo left Piyun Mountain and quietly appeared here. The hidden Yuan Ing Jian Xiu Cui Wei also appeared and said hello softly, "Mr. Wei Shan." Wei Bo smiled and nodded, "Thank you." Cui Wei was speechless for a while. "I am dedicated to the Patriarch Hall of Jisei Peak, staring at the top of my mountain, what hard work." Wei Bo seemed to feel that there was something wrong with what he said. He laughed at himself. This habit must be changed. Before touring Hongzhou town, which borders the 3 rivers at the bookstore, the of Waterley Jean would jokingly say that he is the mountain king of Aquarius Island and the mountain of Jisa Peak. Wei Bo thought it made sense and Li Shuxian's words were very funny. Who is the official boss and who is the subordinate? So I took dozens of books from the bookstore. On the table today, the incense little man from the Ziqingwang temple who just came to Luopashen Dianmao is diligent and conscientious, and is responsible for helping to gather the melon seeds and pile them into mountains. Seeing that Wei Shanjun, there is no Qin Lingjun around him. The little guy who once helped Wei Shanjun to make the nickname everywhere, he squatted behind the hill. As long as I didn't see Wei Yao didn't see me. The private mountains and rivers in the area of Xinjiang Mountain are thousands of miles away. After Yuan Xinye showed his true body, even the people in the market, Everyone can see the huge figure enshrined by the mountain guard. As for the monks watching the ceremony, I really don't understand how the Qingshan sword fairy from Luopa Mountain could get punch after punch under the hands of this old ape. Patriarch Xiaoyue suddenly said in his heart, "Nephew, your choice seems ruthless, but in fact it is wise. If you change it to me to decide, maybe you can't be as decisive as you." No matter what, the next sect master without Qiu Lingshan to fight the full Moon Peak's descendant's sword repair, there is greater hope to provoke this burden. Yen Chu nodded and said, "The two evils are the lesser of the power." Looking back, the suzerain's move did not make the least bit of muddle, which is really impressive. Only Tao Yanbo was dull and speechless. From now on, how should his Qiu Lingshan deal with himself? Among the peaks of Xingyang Mountain where the hearts of the people are dissipated, Qiu Lingshan has a line of sword repair. But can there be a foothold? No longer was Yuan Zhinya, who was enshrined by a mountain protector in the form of a real white ape. Towards the top of his head, he gave birth to the highest level of Dao Fa and the highest level of fist intent. Before the old ape punched, he laughed loudly. "Death is death. Don't want the old man to beg for mercy with you." How about the outcome? Yuan Zhinya, who kept throwing punches in half a stick of incense, would really have no idea. Yuan Zhinya handed out that punch, and a circle of golden ripples appeared in the sky, spreading rapidly in all directions, and the entire Xingyang mountain boundary seemed to have a layer of magnificent golden waves slowly passing by. The arm that the old ape threw a fist was like a mountain range, and the ground was cracked, all broken, and the heavy rain splashed wildly. The old ape was still in the air, still maintaining that forward posture, but the small world a few miles around the blue shirt was still the sun, the moon and the stars in an orderly manner, and the avenues flowed endlessly. The old ape with one broken arm had his shoulders slightly tilted, just touching the edge of the small world, where the avenues intersect, the stars are splashing and the sky is full of fire and rain. Qin Pingon said, "Then change me." The vision of heaven and earth suddenly converged, and the martial arts of 10 realms, returning to the first level. Boxing is swordsmanship, like a swordsmanship that had fallen to the world 10,000 years ago. A huge vortex appeared at the sky, and there was a golden sword light that seemed to be cruising in the long river of time for thousands of years. It broke through the air and hit the head of the old ape's body, hitting Yuan Zhinya directly. The land of Yangshan, facing the ground, just hit the peak of the sword on the back of the fairy. The light of the sword fell straight and lasted for a long time, like a golden long sword that invisibly connected the sky and the earth. After piercing the head of the old ape, it was inserted diagonally into the ground. Yuan Zhinya prostrated on the ground, roaring, resting his hands on the ground, trying to lift his head as hard as he could, struggling to get up. Then the shirt in the blue shirt was straight and standing on its head, causing Yuan Zhin's page door to hang down instantly. Not close to the back, Jianfeng. Qin Pingon raised his arm high, 5 thunderstorms in his palm, like a robbery, a swift press hitting Yuan Zini's neck. With his left arm, the long sword on that line of Fengshan Gate archway swims at night, turning into a rainbow, wearing a blue shirt, holding a long sword, dragging the sword away, walking slowly at the neck of the old ape. The sword is light swipe across. In the end, he cut off a huge head of Yuan Zhinya and let it roll to the foot of the mountain. In a sleeve, Fu Lu kept flying out like a long river, smashing Yuan Zini's headless body. The head was at the foot of the mountain, and his eyes were still staring at the blue shirt on the top of the mountain, and his eyes were gradually distracting. "I don't know if it is dead or unwilling, and I don't want to close it." Qin Pingon nodded towards it. For some reason, Yuan Zhinya seemed to understand the meaning of the old boy in Nipping Lane. He nodded slightly and finally closed his eyes. It was exactly the same choice as the ghost Nun Situ Waning of the full moon peak. He chose to be a remnant of the Jade Realm. The rime of Taoism and the only remaining Qi luck are all left and given to this Xingyang mountain. The old ape, who could have chosen to blow up the golden core and the nascent soul, had only one thought in his lifetime, as if he was talking to the man on the top of the mountain: "I beg you, don't kill Tao Zi." And that blue shirt, like an unknown prophet, nodded at the time, saying, "I am not you." Yuan Zini's soul dissipated, and an old man in white clothes with a vague body shape was faintly visible, standing beside his head at the foot of the mountain. His last word in this life was to raise his head, look at the young man, and ask in his heart, "Kill me, who is it?" Qin Pingon didn't answer, only waved his sleeves to disperse his soul. Night Tour returns to the sheath with his back behind. Lifting one foot, stomping heavily on the ground, the whole hill under his feet split in 4 or 5. There are no immortals carrying the sword peak in the world, only tourists in Qingshan carrying the sword. On the avenue, visitors at Bingshui are not afraid of encountering ghosts, they are afraid of talents. In addition to the people watching the ceremony in Luopa Mountain, all the sword immortals and disciples of Xingyang Mountain, as well as all the guests staying in the old and new peaks, felt a strange sense of suffocation at this moment. It was as if everyone was standing beside him at the moment, a sword fairy from Luopa Mountain. In that blue shirt, Yufeng came to the top of the sword where he lost a patriarch hall. As the lord of Xingyang Mountain, Emperor Bamboo immediately held his fist and respected, Xingyang Mountain Bamboo Emperor, pay respect to Lord Chen Shan. Lu Xianying rolled his eyes and glanced at Chen Pingan. Lu Xianying took the lead in Yufeng to leave, looked around, saw the round-faced girl standing among the reeds, and rushed to Egret Crossing immediately. Chen Pingan looked around, did not say much, followed Lu Xianying to Yufeng and left. During this time he turned his head and smiled brightly with Bailudu, then came to the white-clothed boy and the black-clothed girl, rubbed the heads of the millet grains and laughed softly. Said, "Go home.